All right, live, here we go. This is a brand new show. This is the final dungeon where, or nothing, there is no where. I'm so used to throwing in a catchphrase. This doesn't have a catchphrase. A movie discussion pocket dimension. The only thing that matters is film and time does not exist. Actually, it's the other way around, but this is the final dungeon, a show that is yet to have a catchphrase. I don't know if we need one or not, but a show dedicated to all things video games. I'm Cole, joined by my good friends Eric and Jay. Finally reunited after some time. It's good to be on the air again with Eric. It's been a while, so that's cool.
Yes.
And as
I'm notoriously elusive as it is, and this whole COVID thing hasn't made it any better.
Exactly, but we managed to track him down somewhat. So this, as we've said, like on other channels and stuff, this show was in the works for a long time, and it's really gratifying to finally get it going. It was even hard just coming up with the name. I think there is another show somewhere probably called The Final Dungeon, but oh my god, we went through so many names. I like The Final Dungeon. It works.
We tried our best, man. Everything we came up with was taken. So
we'll soon surpass whatever other Final Dungeon existed, I promise you, because we're something different. So yeah, I mean, we're all big gamers, I guess is what you'd say. I mean, there's different ways of defining it nowadays, and we don't want to get into that and stuff, and toxic gamer culture, stuff like that. But we're just going to talk about the things that we like mostly, and we're really hoping, we have our own diverse experiences and tastes, but we know we don't cover everything. We don't cover every aspect of it. There are certain genres and certain things that none of us have a lot of experience in, but we'll try to make up for that. And it's a fluid thing. Things could change. Sometimes you get into something you weren't, but we're hoping that we're somewhat sufficiently diverse that we'll be able to each bring something about it, and that's what this episode is going to be about. It's just sort of tell you guys what the show is sort of going to be, and then each of us in turn is just going to talk a little briefly so that going forward you have an idea of each individual sort of personal experience and tastes. So, and the other thing was we also thinking format-wise, the show could be a little different from other things we've been involved in that there might be a couple times, I mean, this will sort of be the main thing, the three of us having a discussion on various topics, but we've also floated the idea of maybe individually we would upload videos of doing something like, say, showing off a collection or something like that, or I don't know, there's probably something else that works in that too, so that's all highly possible, so that'll be a cool thing to do as we go forward. This probably won't be a weekly show, but we will try to be as regular as we can with it. So, again, when we have sort of a firmer idea of when episodes are coming out, we'll do our best to promote them because we want people to watch them and be involved as much as possible. But, so welcome to episode 0, the introduction. Is there anything else anybody want to say about what they think the show is supposed to be?
No, I don't know. I mean, we really just talked about it was sort of organic how it came up, I think, which is sort of, I think, good because it makes for good conversation. We all play video games in one form or another, and it seemed like we all sort of played, different kinds of games, and there was some crossover in the games that we liked and we thought about, and we've had debates about gaming systems that we've played and platforms, because I think maybe I'm misrepresenting you, Cole, but I thought either you have played on the Jaguar or you had one. But that was always a system. It's I knew of it. It was that Jaguar. It's it felt to me like it was out for 1 month and then it died.
Yeah, it was very elusive. We'll talk about that. Right. What I sometimes call the 4.5 generation, which would have been like Jaguar, would have been 3DO, and sometimes the Philips CDI gets thrown into there. That's something I have a big fascination with.
Is that before the 64-bit?
Right. So technically how it works is you would say the 4th generation of gaming consoles was the 16-bit era. So, and the 5th would be the 32-bit plus the 64 was the same thing. So often that in-between era of 93, 94 is sometimes known as the 4.5 generation because it's kind of like a lost generation because it was supposed to...
Well, not to get us too far off track before we get started here, but the Jaguar was famous for not actually being 64. It was two 32-bit.
Yeah, but advertised as the world's first 64.
Yeah.
Right. And like Eric said, we met and we did movie shows, and obviously movies were our thing, but we always get into talking about other things, and we always thought it would be cool to give the movie stuff a rest because we do plenty of that and other things, and just purely focus on video games. So that's where this really came for, because I think we all just like film have a lot of passion for it and could definitely crank out some good shows dedicated to it. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think kind of like the philosophy of the highly irregular plateau TV was trying to like kind of bring it to like, you know, what should you be watching? There's limited time. Like I've got family, I've got kids. I can't game like I used to. So typically if I'm going to play something, I'm like really interested in it, or maybe it's nostalgia that's bringing me to it. Like, I feel like that's the angle that I bring to it. And I think we can even talk about that kind of stuff too. So it's very fluid, and I like sort of the open format that I think we'll dig into more as it goes on.
Yeah, I think as we move forward, we'll probably become more topical. Just as we kind of flesh out what we're all about, to begin with.
Right. Yeah, we're doing sort of an easing in process,
Mm-hmm.
like I said. It'll probably get a bit more focused and topical. As we said, we will have to have some discussions off camera about some specific episodes. Even though we did, as we said, this hasn't worked for a long time, so we already have some things off the top of our heads that we think would make for good content. Anyway, so that's a good enough introduction. People get what it is. It's not too complicated. So yeah, I think each of us will just and you don't have to be brief. There's no point in being brief. We got lots of time here, so just take as much time as you want to talk about your own sort of history. Obviously, it doesn't have to be everything. Nobody remembers everything, but the stuff you think is significant, and sort of what kind of gamer you see yourself as, and what types of games you like a lot, and bring up maybe a few favorites, etc. So we will start with Jay.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to respond to a comment here. Yeah, so basically, one of the benefits of growing up when we did is, video games were, becoming a thing. I had an Atari 2600. I'm too young to remember it, but I've been told that I spit up all over it and ruined it for my older brother and sister, so they kind of hated my guts for a little while for doing that. But my brother had a Commodore 64 that I kind of messed around with, but it wasn't until the NES, which I got fairly early on, probably like 87, because I didn't even want it. I didn't even know it existed at that time. It wasn't really on my radar, but got it, and turns out my mom really liked it a lot for some reason. She only played a few games on that, and that was it. And, never again. But she was really into Mario, as everyone was. But that's, when I think of the NES, I think of Mario, just because it's such a great game. I think, classic side scroller style. Moved on. I made a switch. My cousin talked me into getting a Genesis. Got a Genesis, played that for quite a while. Got a Sega CD, played that for quite a while. And then I think I just kind of stepped out for a generation or two because I didn't really get back into games until my college years with the PS2. Played the Nintendo 64 quite a bit at friends' houses. Played Sega Saturn at friends' houses, but it wasn't until PS2 that I personally had a newer system. Got into that. Had a ton of games. Unfortunately, it got stolen, and then I became an Xbox person. I love the PlayStation as well. I'm not a what do they call those guys?
Fanboy?
It's like you're declaring your gender.
Yeah,
I'm an Xbox person.
I know, it's so stupid, man. Why can't you like both?
Yeah, this show is not about fanboyism or championing one company over another or whatever like that. Very quickly, I'll say I never had a bias in games until Microsoft came along, and I don't like Xbox and stuff. But you're not going to hear me whine and bitch and complain about it. It's just not my area. But,
I'm gonna poke it Cole though to try and get that to come out. But I'm sure he's not gonna start with that.
I don't know if you guys have seen the memes and stuff, man. It's always one calling the other gay. I saw one. This is how, I don't remember which one it was. PlayStation or Xbox guys open a door and they open it with their butthole. I thought it was pretty funny, but anyway, I've never really been into that. I've always kind of liked both. It just happened that at that time in my life I didn't have enough money for both, so I had Xbox. And
well, I have a question, if I can insert as you're going through your history. So you talked about Nintendo 64, and then you talked about Xbox. And it sounded like Nintendo 64 is where the gaming increased. was there at any point like an increase in your social activity as it pertained to gaming? Like friends would come over to play games with you? Because I just like Nintendo 64 was pretty groundbreaking for me because, you know, on like Super Nintendo, like I could be Mario, my friend could be Luigi, or maybe you could play Mario Kart, but it was still only 2-player. You know, on Nintendo 64, not only could you play with a friend, like you could kind of interact with one another, and you couldn't Mario Kart, but like you could also get 2 other people in there. Like you could play NBA Hang Time, like that kind of stuff. Was that an element of it for you?
Yeah, I didn't have the 64. I was just at friends' houses that I played.
Okay.
And that was, you know, of course, GoldenEye. That's some of my best, you know, probably best video game memories.
Yeah, I think we'll all have things to say about GoldenEye.
Which is sad because I don't think it's the same. You know, I know now multiplayer is where it's at. Everything wants to be multiplayer, but nobody's in the same room. And I really think that takes away from an aspect
of the
gaming because, I mean, hell, a lot of games don't even have that feature anymore. I can't even think of a new game that has, like, I forget what the terminology is, but, you know, multiplayer where you're playing on the same system or whatever.
Well, it was like, I think the split screen might be, at least, I don't know if that's the official term, but, you know, either 2-player or 4-player split screen is how you could.
Maybe one of the Borderlands, maybe you could do that. But anyway, we'll get there. I know Borderlands 2, I think it is, because I played with a buddy of mine. The same guy that I played GoldenEye with. We both got into Borderlands. But after Xbox, you know, I was really into Halo, and my roommate in college, we played the shit out of Halo. You know,
yes.
all nonstop, man. Like we beat that thing every which direction on the hardest level. You know, we even got to the point where we were like walking through levels backwards and stuff, just because we knew everything about the game. You know, and you know, we had a lot of free time on our hands, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, that was one of the biggest, you know, things that allowed me to game as much as I did was having the free time. But after Xbox was Xbox 360, Xbox One I have, and you know we can get into those later on. But I also have a PS4, and I need to mention portable gaming a little bit.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I missed over Game Boy. That's one of the huge parts of my life as well. And I also got I had a Game Gear, and I had a few games.
That's a rare one. I feel like not a lot of people even knew what Game Gear was.
The thing about Game Gear that everyone remembers was that thing eating batteries.
Batteries.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
It was I probably could have bought 3 Game Gears for the amount I spent on batteries. But you know, I eventually traded my Game Gear away for I think a bunch of Game Boy games. I don't remember, but anyway, a friend of mine in high school I traded with, and then I got really into the PSP.
Nice.
And really loved that. That's one of the things that got me back into gaming hard in my adult life was the PSP, and then I got the PS Vita as well, which that's a great system, but it just didn't have enough games come out on it. You know, it's another one that incorporates like it has the back on it is like a touch sensor. Oh, I've actually got it over here. I'll get it out in a minute, but it's you know like the Uncharted. You could do the you could like break locks or pick locks with the back. Like you have to rub it just right or whatever. It's kind of stupid. It's kind of similar to the Wii U in that it incorporates kind of a stupid thing that you're required to use, you know, and that's what I always hated about the Wii U is that I just want to use the Pro Controller by myself, but you can't. You have that damn big tablet thing has to be turned on in order to play the game.
I hate it's like you're like holding a keyboard to play that. It's huge. Like I can't even get both my hands in the screen to represent how big that controller was for Wii U.
And that's another system that had a bunch of really good games come out on it. It utilized the specificity of that controller too much. Because it seems like at first games were really using it, and then they just quit. Even using the touchscreen aspect, it's like it's not even worthwhile anymore. Nobody cares about it. And then, Nintendo put out the Switch, which I don't have yet, but I'm going to get one sometime soon. And I'll let someone else take over from there.
All right, I'll just to say some stuff about what you mentioned. The Game Gear, that was the price of color, wasn't it? It's like, who cares? Game Boy doesn't have color, but this has color, but that color comes at a cost. I'm sure you remember Sega's very in-your-face marketing at the time.
That's what I started thinking. That's right. There was a commercial.
Because the idea during the fourth generation was that Nintendo was sort of the old school, wholesome stuff and more of a toy, whereas the cool kids, the hip people, the older people were into Sega, and their marketing was all about that. And I remember one of the first commercials of the Game Gear. So weird. Like, it worked though. People loved it. They scream Sega at the end. Like, it had like a dead squirrel in it. Remember, somebody's like playing a Game Boy and he hits himself in the head with a dead squirrel so that he can see color, and he like imagines. But it's like a Game Gear, like, holy shit.
I don't remember that. But
you can find it on YouTube. It's amazing.
Cole and I have talked about this before. It perfectly captures that period of time in the 90s. It's like a acid trip on meth or something, man. It's so nuts.
I know.
Commercials, like, just a crazy
Super Nintendo versus Sega commercials. Like, I specifically remember one where there's like a broken down like Super Nintendo like on the back of a truck. There's like smoke coming out of it, and then the Sega is like all smooth and cool, and it's like working really perfectly. There's some sort of commercial like that I have in mind that was kind of like that idea that like they're cool, the Nintendo's slow, you can't do what you need to with it.
It was very much like the Pepsi Coke thing. Whereas like Coke was the older classic and Pepsi was hip and young for the new generation. And the idea was Coke never acknowledged Pepsi, but a big part of Pepsi's whole advertising strategy was to like basically say Pepsi, it's better than Coke. They had tons and tons of commercials, showing like people preferring Pepsi to Coke, whereas Coke just never acknowledged Pepsi. It was kind of the same thing. For Genesis, a lot of their advertising was like, we're better and cooler than Nintendo, and Nintendo just never, bothered with them. But yeah, another thing that should be pointed out is that we're of different ages, but we're all still within a general sort of age range. I'm in the middle. Jay is the old man, and Eric's a bit younger, but we're all within the sort of same thing. So we have a lot of similar sort of shared experiences of that, particularly like stuff like the early 90s, like you said, like advertising at that time, everything about the 90s was extreme and in your face, and you come home, you're like, Mom, what's for supper? And she'd be like, I got pizza pops, and he'd throw it at you, and and your friends would be eating like fruit snacks like they were crystal meth or something. And then we go out
hammers and gushers,
stick it in your face and spray it. And then you go out and do, go out on the half pipe. I took that from Clone High, by the way. I go out in the half pipe and do extreme stuff with Tony the Tiger. Like, that's what we were. Like, our generation was just like all hopped up on sugar and cartoons and violence and stuff. And that's kind of turned us into the adults we are today. And so, yeah, that generation of video games had a lot to do with it. And video games were making that sort of ascension from like a little hobby thing into like the billion-dollar industry that it would become. And of course, it would have its day of reckoning, just like everything else before it, like comic books in the 50s, horror movies and rock and roll in the 80s and the 90s. There was a reckoning, against comics, against video games. I'm sure we can do that in a future episode too, talking about just that era when people were attacking the video games for corrupting the youth, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, we'll turn it over to Eric. He can talk about his own history and all that stuff.
Sure. I mean, my first real exposure to like video games was like the old commercials for the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, which it's funny, I only recently learned, or I guess it was sort of confirmed, like there was some article where like Nintendo came out and they clarified, like, listen, it's not called the Nintendo, it is the Nintendo Entertainment System. Like that, it is, shorten it to NES, but it's not just the Nintendo. But I always called it Nintendo. I think everybody did. But it's funny to have that re-legislated.
The NES, I hate that terminology, man. It's like a pet peeve.
Yeah.
I guess it's worse for the other because people say SNES. Like SNES just sounds ridiculous.
But that was my first system, and like when I got it, like I had like, I don't know, my parents weren't all that cool. Like we bought the system and it came with Super Mario and Duck Hunt. So like that's pretty much all I had for a while. And I remember playing it, and like back then my mom would actually play with me. And I distinctly recall like sometimes when we play Mario, because remember in that first Mario, there's some really big pits to jump over. Like she would like go into this like full body heave
But my mother
to
did
like, get
too.
over the pit.
Exact same thing. I swear, exact same thing. Yeah.
But I mean, I dug Mario. I mean, I played a lot of that. Played Duck Hunt, and eventually, like, I started, I started like renting games, which was something I eventually stopped doing because I remembered like someone at like a video game store saying like, yeah, dude, don't rent the games from the video store because like other people don't take care of them and it'll like screw up your system. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I did stop doing it. But if I didn't do that, like I never would have played Friday the 13th, the video game for Nintendo, which I thought was great. In fact, I had gotten the game like later. Like I actually somehow bought a copy. I don't know where I got that from, but like I had it like in the era of when I had a Nintendo 64. And so when I had friends over and we were playing GoldenEye and stuff, at one point we pulled out like Friday the 13th. And even then, like when I was playing it the first time around, I actually fought Mrs. Voorhees' head. Like, and I only ever did that once. And I know, like, again, you can read about it, like it's something that's in the game, but it was just really hard to find her, as I recall. And I think if you beat her too, you got like a pitchfork. It was like the strongest one. Anyway,
Yeah.
I played a bunch of yeah. No, it was interesting. But like those games were so hard. Like, and I think about that because I think some of the games they're now available because I do have a Switch, and I'm not trying to jump ahead, but using like that Nintendo service, you can like play old Nintendo games. I forget what the service is called, or Nintendo Classic or something.
Just Switch Online, isn't it?
Maybe yeah, Switch Online, but like you can play like Super Mario Brothers 3 is on there, which is awesome. And but I think I tried to play like Castlevania, and I was like, holy crap, this game is really hard. And even
I got
like
the
again
two
now, I'm
controllers
like
for that too. The Switch.
yeah, that's
Okay.
right. Because
So
you could get that. I still have the Switch controller, but I was gonna buy. I have the actual like the Switch like handheld controllers, and I also bought the Pro version. But there's kind of it's weird like the Pro version on Switch. I feel like you're sort of like you're missing some functionality because it doesn't vibrate the way that the normal controllers do. Like there are certain things like when you play the current Mario games where you're supposed to like shake it to like make his head spin or whatever. Like that one doesn't work as well for it. But anyway, I remember Super Nintendo was a big deal. Like, and I was at school one day. I was like going over to a friend's house like for a sleepover, and he was like one of the first kids in class who had a Super Nintendo, and I got sick. And so I didn't get to play it till I bought till my parents got it for me. I was so mad. But yeah, Super Nintendo is where I fell in love with Mega Man. Like I played Mega Man on Nintendo, but I never quite had the affection for it that I did when I started playing like Mega Man X. Like I love those games. Like I've even bought the versions like the collection you can get for like it was like PlayStation 3 I think, or maybe it was PlayStation 2 where that first came out. But like I love those games, and Super Nintendo is where I first played them. Nintendo 64, big deal. Like I remember do you guys remember like all of the marketing and the promotion around that? I just remember it was huge. Like, and I bought a gamer magazine that had like a walkthrough for Super Mario 64, and I was just like so. If you've ever seen that South Park where Cartman's like waiting for the Wii, like come on, like I felt like that was me for Nintendo 64. Like I wanted that so bad, and then on Christmas morning I got it. But here's some old fashioned drama. We did like our TV. It needed like the RF connection. Like the Nintendo 64 could work with the analog cables, the white, yellow, green, or white, yellow, red.
The AV, yeah.
Yeah, the AV. But our TV was so old that it needed like the RF connection, and my parents didn't get it. So like I couldn't play it for like 2 days. So it was in the house and I couldn't play it. It was awful.
Oh man.
But yeah, that was the game changer though, because like that's where Mario 64 was awesome. GoldenEye, obviously, like I won't go too deep into it just because hell, we could have like an entire show about GoldenEye. And I'm always a big champion of like bringing up Perfect Dark, because in a lot of ways I liked Perfect Dark more than I like GoldenEye. I think it did more like progressive things, you know, that like future games, even into the Xbox 360 generation, like even they didn't do as well as Perfect Dark did. But I forget where I got it, but somewhere along the way, like I did get a PS1. Like I don't know if someone I sold it to me, but at some point between Nintendo 64 and Xbox, I got a PS1. And then I think I even got a PS2 somehow, like again, used or something. But the PS2, like I never played the games. Like I used it as a DVD player because I never had it. Again, that was also in the transition between VHS and DVDs.
Right, that was one of the incentives to get it, right? Like
Yeah.
that was my first DVD player. That was one of the reasons
Exactly.
I wanted it. So
that was mine. Yeah.
You know, I was my first year at university, and I was like, now, like, you know, it's cool. I can play movies in my room with the games.
And it was just cool, right? Like it was like a computer. Like for the first time, it was like a video game system that like you logged into it and it like booted up and it had like a home screen. Like that just blew my mind at the time, right? But yeah, Xbox, that was really the big one. And you know, I played. Again, we could have an entire show about Halo, which isn't meant to exclude Cole if he hasn't played it as much. But
I didn't play it. I'll very briefly say my experience with Halo was in the early 2000s. I had friends that were still living in my hometown, and when I was like back there for like times in the summer and things like that, they had regular like get-togethers to play Halo, and I would play with them, and I would always be the worst one because I didn't have any experience with it. So it's not like I didn't enjoy it, but like I didn't contribute very much. You know, I never had time to play it or practice on my own, so I was always the weakest link. I was always getting killed the most, but you know, I tried my best.
I feel like everybody has had that one friend. Everybody had a Cole, because it was the same thing for us. Where like two of my best friends, they had it and they were okay, and then there was always like one random fourth we would get who was terrible, and it was basically just you'd like one shot him with the pistol and then go and deal with the other guys.
Yeah. And it wasn't fun for me because I'm used to being better than people at games.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't the person in the room who wasn't good at games. I just I didn't have an Xbox. I didn't play these games, so it was pretty frustrating because I wasn't like the one lame guy who sucks at all games. I could probably have beaten them in a lot of games, but it was doubly frustrating from that perspective.
You always have that one asshole friend that wants to be odd job every time.
We had a rule, and I think everybody had a rule.
Rules too.
You can't be odd job.
We had lots of rules, and we'll get into it because it was like quite sophisticated, the rules we came up with. So my one friend and I, we were sadistic because when we would play Perfect Dark, there was a gun in the original Perfect Dark called the oh God, I can't remember the name of it now, but basically it could see through and shoot through walls. And so we would play with his little brother, and we'd give him a bunch of bots. And we'd be like, no, look, you outnumber us. Like you're like, it's just me and him, and you've got like these 10 bots. Like, man, you're gonna beat us. And then we would like just go and like hide in the most distant corner of the level and use the far sight and just pick him. Like we'd wait for him to spawn, and just the second he'd spawn, we'd like shoot him in the head. It was horrible. He'd like run out of the room crying. Again, that's bullying I'm admitting to, and that's terrible, but we did it. You're off the show, Eric.
Yes, I'm sorry.
You've broken our rule of fair play.
That's
but
simple.
Which is more important than ever in today's climate of gaming.
But as you know, when we weren't playing with my friend's little brother, like we had rules in like Perfect Dark. It's like we even had rules about like the bots. It's like if we needed to like add a bot, it was like okay, but you can't have the super good bot because like some of the bots were like too good. Like they only headshot you, and they were really fast and they were really good. It's like it would overpower someone. Like
I'm trying to remember their names. They were called Sims. I know the weakest one was Meat Sim.
Yeah, that's right.
One. They were just suicidal. They just run at you and get killed. But I'm trying to remember. There was like at least 5 levels of proficiency in the bots, and there's like God,
I feel like there was even more than that. Yeah,
maybe.
And some of them were like very specific. Like there was like a karate sim where like he would never pick up a weapon and all he would ever try to do is like beat you up.
You're right. It wasn't just difficulty. It was just the way they acted. Yeah, that's right. It wasn't like a really fast running sim and they always ran away.
Yeah. And which, by the way, like This was a game that came out, what, like 98, 99? Or no, I guess it was 2000 is when that came out. So it was kind of near the end of the Nintendo 64 cycle. But regardless, like, what a progressive game. Like, they had bots that were pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, the AI on that I thought was sharp. Anyway.
I was really excited about that too. It was a lot of fun because you could really customize how you did like a match, right? You'd be like me and you versus this, and then we'll throw this kind of bot, this kind of sim in, and that kind of sim. You can make some really chaotic situations, which I really appreciate.
And it also had a co-op mode, right? Like, which I think I'm sure there were other games before that had like a co-op mode, but that's the first game I really remember where like I could just play the single player of the game, but like my friend could like help and like fight through the levels with me. Like, I just thought that was really cool. The frame rate would really slow. It would get really bad sometimes if there's a lot of explosions. Anyway, sorry to get off track.
It's almost too bad they didn't save it for GameCube. But I mean, it's good, I guess. But as we said, this could be a topic again. Like, there's a lot of games that came towards the end of the lifespan of a system, and that leads to them getting overlooked. And I think that's kind of works for Perfect Dark, and also because Perfect Dark, there was a lot of hype around it because it was made by the same people that made GoldenEye, and because it wasn't exactly like GoldenEye, a lot of people were disappointed with it. But I was like you, I really appreciated that they were trying to do something different and progressive and not just rehash the same thing.
Oh yeah, like there's a great, and I don't know if it was available through something else, but on YouTube you can find a GoldenEye documentary, which it's only like 45 minutes or something, or maybe an hour, but it's basically just interviews with the people who made GoldenEye, and I'd never knew the backstory that this thing talks about. The makers of the game basically talk about how, like, we pretty much we just were given like the script to GoldenEye, and we were like allowed to see like some props and stuff, but we were basically like allowed to just do whatever we wanted. Like, if I'm not mistaken, the only things they weren't allowed to do were associated with like rights issues. So like they couldn't actually name that's why the guns have kind of funny
the guns
names.
all have different names.
Like it was a rights thing with the guns. They coded into the game, but then they had to pull it out. All the former Bonds. So there was a Sean Connery, and I think some people like pulled that. Like some people have like hacked that into the game.
Hacked it,
because I think it's like in the game code somewhere.
You can play Roger Moore and Connery and Lazenby. I've seen that in magazines.
And I think the Nintendo people, their only comment was about blood. And there wasn't a ton of blood, but remember sometimes when you'd shoot a guy, like you'd have like a kind of a damp red spot.
I mean, blood didn't spatter or pool. It just an area turned red, so you couldn't really call it a bloody thing. Even if you tried to shoot them a million times, only so much blood would be produced, right? That was sort of it was an important moment for Nintendo because it was moving forward into a more sort of violent realm, which they'd stayed out of for so long.
That's right, and that was the only thing about it that was kind of controversial, at least from a Nintendo perspective. Meanwhile, Perfect Dark actually did have blood splatter. Like, I don't think it like splattered on the walls, but like when you'd shoot a guy in the head, like you'd see some blood shoot off his head. Anyway. So again, Xbox, I won't go too deep. That's a show almost unto itself, multiple shows. Carrying along with that, I got the Xbox 360. I kind of stayed in the Xbox generation. And by the way, Xbox 360, like for my money, that controller is the definitive gaming controller of my life. Even like the Xbox One controller, I think they screwed it up. Like, it was perfect, and then they tweaked it a little bit. Like, it's fine. Like, it works. But for me, that, like, S-type, Xbox 360 controller is perfection. It fit my hands perfectly. The way the sticks, the weight, the give, everything about it was great. But again, like, that's sort of the evolution, too, of social gaming. Like, Xbox Live obviously started with the original Xbox a little bit, but Xbox 360 is where that really became something else. Like, that's where, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, I would play with like buddies from work. I'd play with my old friends. Like, we'd get some good games going. Like Nazi Zombies from Call of Duty World at War. Like, my friends and I, we'd play that like till 3 a.m. And it was always about like, we had a system, right? Like, we'd like back ourselves into this like defensible position in the level, and we'd get all the power weapons. And it was just like, how many levels how high could we get? Like, I think the highest we ever got was like 34. And the only reason we didn't get higher is like someone screwed up. Like, we were doing really well, and then someone didn't do the right thing, and then it all got screwed up. But like, that was just fun. Like, and it was time just like talking and hanging out. I did get a PlayStation 3, but again, it was like, I don't think I actually sought it out. I think somehow I got a gift card or someone gave me their old system. But I hated PlayStation 3. And, the controller, I never liked it. So I played some games on it, but I was not a fan. But next generation, when it was PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, I went PlayStation 4 because, for a number of reasons, but I was pissed off about Xbox still making you put stupid batteries in your controller when PlayStation had rechargeable controllers for years now. And then just like if you remember at the beginning of Xbox One, they forced you to get the Kinect, which made it like a $600 system. They made a bunch of like, I thought, really stupid like build decisions that it bothered me. I was like, listen, I'm an Xbox guy, and you're pissing me off. So I went to PlayStation 4.
The always on with a camera on.
That too. That's right.
And, it's the same thing. People don't, consider this, but it's the same thing your phone does. If you have Siri on it, it's always on, and, could potentially be hacked or whatever. But I do remember that.
At all.
That really hurt their sales, I think, that whole gimmick they were going for.
Well, I think that's why PlayStation 4, I think it's pretty much in the record books at this point. Like, they won the generation. Like, in terms of total sales, in terms of, like, the games and things. I think And here's the thing too, like Xbox One, I thought made some other than like some of those stupid decisions, they made some really interesting decisions in the beginning, like the split screen, the way it could integrate with cable, so you could like play a game on one side and watch TV on the other side of your screen, which by the way is all gone now. Like they wiped it out of the OS, and it was just really progressive and interesting, and I liked how they were kind of pushing that boundary, but then they backed away from it.
I don't think I even knew about that.
It was like maybe the first 2 years or so, and then they eventually. Well, part of the problem is the app developers had to play ball. So like Netflix, for example, like that was one example where Netflix's app was built so it could take up your whole screen, or it could be like half the screen, and then you could play a game on the other side. Well, eventually Netflix would like push through code for their app. They wouldn't allow you to do that. So I think because like their app developers kind of stopped embracing that design decision, that might be, and again, I'm not, maybe somebody out there who knows better than I will explain that's not why they stopped. But as I understand it, that is a thing. Like Netflix stopped allowing their app to do that. In any case, I did get an Xbox One eventually. Like I think my parents, if I remember correctly, my parents redid their kitchen. And one day I just get like a gift card in the mail, like, hey, our contractor gave us a gift card. We know you like Best Buy. Take this. And it was like $400 or something.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, oh, okay. And I went down to Best Buy and I got an Xbox One. But it wasn't my money. But I like it. It's fun. And I'm sorry if I took too long, but that kind of brings me up to date. And there's, there's a lot of things we could talk about in there, but it was, again, I think I've never called myself a gamer really. Probably the height of like my gaming was like Halo 1, 2, and 3. And then in the middle of all that, like Call of Duty. Like I would play a lot. I'd play late. But there are people out there who are like super good. Like they had all the timing down. I've never been that good.
I don't really consider myself a gamer either. I guess game enthusiast maybe.
Yeah.
But as a hobby. But you say gamer, you think of someone with the whole setup, and they like it's basically their job.
Yeah, they've got they've got their system hooked in to reduce the latency between their button presses, and like I've never been that sophisticated.
One thing I wanted to mention real quick is I left out PC gaming.
Yeah,
I know we'll get.
Which we'll also talk about on the show, by the way. This isn't just consoles. We'll talk about PC gaming too.
I am mainly a console gamer, always have been, but I did play quite a few games on PC, like Doom and Myst, and even games before that. Really early on. Terrible like Dragon's Lair, Dragon Quest. What was it? I can't think.
That was Dragon's Lair, isn't that it?
Dragon's Lair was the weird arcade one with the animation.
Oh, yeah. No,
Don Booth did the animation for it. It was super expensive at the arcade. I don't know the home versions they made. But like you could only really win if you knew what you're doing beforehand. Like you had to, or you just crash into a wall or something. You'd put like a buck into the machine, which was a bunch then, and then you'd smash into a wall, turn into a skeleton, and it'd be game over. Dragon Lair.
With the exception of the occasional Steam game, but I don't really play PC games too much anymore.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even mention that. Like, I think the first computer game I ever played was on my dad. Like, the first computer my family had was my dad's work laptop. Wow. And one of his buddies at work, like the early '90s version of a Computer Geek, installed Doom on my dad's laptop, and that's how I played Doom. And that was super for me. Like, oh man, there's like blood and guts and demons and stuff. Like that game was awesome. And I eventually played I think Duke Nukem I played. And
Wolfenstein,
something like that. Yeah, Wolfenstein. I remember my aunt's computer had some game, Commander Cody.
That sounds familiar.
Something. It was like a 2D. He was like a little green dude, and he had kind of a cool blaster that shot like green orbs or something. Anyway, but but again, computer gaming has never been my.
I just wanted to mention that briefly because I know we'll get berated if we don't mention PC gaming.
Right.
Well, as I'll get to, like in the '90s, I was a PC gamer just as much as I was console. Almost. It just stopped after that because things got more complicated and expensive. I couldn't keep up. But anyway, I saved myself for last because I am the most long-winded. So strap yourselves in. So so the very first video game I ever remember playing was a computer game. And I can't stress this enough, and it's weird because this has worked with the same thing. I said this about the internet, but also getting a computer, because like my family was not, and to this day are not, a tech-savvy family. They're not, first people on the block to get this or that. And my parents, for God's sakes, when I bring the PS4 home, they get mad if I don't, flip the input back so they can get the TV, because they don't know how to do that, even though I tell them a million times, right? So not tech-savvy people. But in the late 80s, we had a Commodore 64. And we had a bunch of pirated games on floppy disks on it. And the first game I remember playing was because a guy came and set it up for us to show it how it worked and stuff. And there was a game on it called Warp Rangers, which was just a shooter where you were a little spaceship going through space shooting stuff in like gray and black. That's the first video game I ever played.
I think I remember that game. Yeah.
And so we had that, and we had all these pirated games. Like one was a bowling game where basically you just have like the pins would be like, like a little pyramid in the back, for thing. They'd just be dots. And then you'd have your own. And the idea of throwing the ball was instead the ball went up and down like this, right? And you press the space bar at the right time. You wanted in the middle. If you get in the middle, you get a strike, right? And so it was bowling. There was a track and field game, all sorts of stuff like that. And I used to play through them endlessly, even though they were, boring derivative. I remember there was like a cool battleship one where like you were a sub and ships would pass above you and you would shoot torpedoes up at them. But they could like drop depth charges and bombs down on you, and it got faster as you went. And there was a similar one, like a World War II bombing thing, where you flew over things and dropped bombs, and it was all pixelated, Commodore 64-ish graphics. And just to stay on the PC thing again, around like 93, 94, we once again got a pretty, I don't even remember the make, but a pretty top of the line, new computer once again. CD-ROM and all that stuff, and a guy came in and showed us, and once again there were all sorts of cool games that came with it you could find. I remember a game called Load Runner. That was a cool game. You should look it up. It's a cool game. It's just you're a little guy, and you're very small on the screen. It's a very big screen with multiple levels, and basically I don't think you have any way of fighting things. You just have to run away from them and climb up ladders and stuff and jump out of traps and stuff. But it's a really cool game. It gets really addictive as it goes. I've been playing forever, and I'll get into more of that. So I'll back up again. So I can't talk about my gaming history. It's very much defined by Ryan Ryho, who's not on here. In that, I'm sure people who know, we've been friends over 30 years. We grew up together. We grew up in the same street. And Ryan was a gamer sort of before I was. And he was better at games than I was for a while, too. And how it was he got a Nintendo pretty early, like maybe 88, something like that. Keep in mind, this one when we were like 5. And it was the main reason was because his dad had actually owned an Intellivision. I think they made a second Intellivision called Intellivision 2. And his dad, and I don't know if his mom played, but they used to play just after they got married. And they packed it away by the time Ryan was old enough to play, but they got him a Nintendo. I don't even know if he asked for it. They just got him a Nintendo. So that was this big thing, was going to Ryan's house and playing Nintendo games, because I didn't get a Nintendo of my own. But the Super Nintendo was already out. It was Christmas of '91 when I got the Nintendo. I was still super psyched to have it. By that time, Ryan also had a Super Nintendo. And so, yeah, when I got my Nintendo, it was all sort of defined by the sort of stuff I played with Ryan. Mega Man 2 was one of my first games. I love that game.
Nice.
I always played the Mario games. Trying to think what else I owned. It was weird. I was talking to Jay the other day about 31 and 1 was a big deal, the big pirated game. Have you heard of 31 and 1? No? Okay, because it's not like a normal cartridge. It's like two cartridges just put together, and one part is white and one part is gray. And anyway, it had 31 games on it. The first game is just the first Super Mario Brothers, but a lot of the games are like untranslated versions of games that were not brought over from Japan. So sometimes it's just all Japanese text and you don't know what you're doing. But they had games like Balloon Fight on there. Maybe you've seen Balloon Fight. You can see that on like Switch and stuff. Balloon Fight was on there. A very early Macross game was on there where it was a shooter and you could turn into the robot and shoot. There was a pool game. But yeah, it was called 31 and 1. When you booted it up and turned it on, it would just be this big screen of a list of games on this side and this side, and it had this music that would play while you selected the games. And I spent so much time playing every game on there because it was 31 games. It was a big deal. And I don't know what happened to my copy. I don't even know if it was mine. I think I might have inherited it or bought it from somebody that disappeared. That was the big problem with my early games. It's like a lot came and went because we were loaning them out to each other and leaving them at each other's house and stuff. It was a big deal that I got to play Mario 3 because Mario 3... I'm trying to think. Because Mario 3 came out in '89, I guess. So that's before I had a Nintendo. So I'm a little confused by the time here. Because I remember my dad bought it on a trip in Boston. And it doesn't seem like it was available here yet. But maybe I'm remembering that wrong.
I Mario 3.
Maybe it's 90. Mario 3 remains my... no, because I think 90 is... or Super Mario World came out at the launch of the system. And the system was launched in '89. So it must be earlier. But anyway, so Mario 3 remains like my favorite platforming game, just by like this much. Still, I love that game so much. I think it's just got perfect level design. But I'm not going to... Sorry, I'm already doing it. I don't want to dwell on every individual game, or we'll never get through this. So anyway, we'll fast forward. So again, Ryan was still ahead of me. He had a Super Nintendo way before I did, and I had a next-door neighbor that had a Genesis. I think he just bought it just to be different, which was good because it gave me exposure to those games. Contra Hardcore, the only for the Sega, was a really fun game that we liked to play. And yeah, I got to play some of the other games like Shinobi 2 and 3, stuff like that. So Eternal Champions, which was a terrible, terrible alternative to Street Fighter, which was only on the Super Nintendo systems. Ryan owned he owned Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which we played like to death. Like, man, we played that game just over and over again. But anyway, jumping ahead. So for my birthday in '94, I was turning 11. That's when I got the Super Nintendo. So the Super Nintendo's already been around for like 4 years by the time I got it. And I was really pleased. Still probably the best present I ever got. Love the Super Nintendo. And about this time, Ryan has a subscription to Nintendo Power, and we're getting a little more serious about things. And all the stuff's getting stirred up in the media about Mortal Kombat and all this stuff. I had a Game Boy. I'm not exactly sure what year I got it. Around the same time, probably, that I got the Super Nintendo. Got a Game Boy. The first Super Mario Land game is so bizarre. Even as Mario games go, it is fucking weird. And the whole last level is a shooter. You're in a plane shooting at stuff. It's so weird.
And the firepower in that game used to annoy the crap out of me because you'd shoot it and it would just like go straight up. Like
it was like a bouncy ball.
Yeah, it's like you had to bank it in a really specific way.
Extremely bouncy. It was only really useful if you were in like in a small tunnel, then it would go.
That's right.
Yeah, it was extremely bouncy and elastic, or a lot of elasticity or whatever you want to say. I remember it was such a weird game. It didn't even feel like Mario. I remember you're in a temple and there's like jumping spiders and stuff. It didn't even feel like Mario, but I was sort of fascinated when I played it. So of course Tetris, played the hell out of Tetris. I never, there was a long time where I didn't buy any Game Boy games. I just left a big gap, and then I got more towards the end of its life. But I had a Ninja Turtles game for it that really sucks that you could beat in like 10 minutes. It was so short. It was really crappy Turtles game on there. But anyway, getting serious with the Super Nintendo. And I think everything really changed when Ryan occasionally bought gaming magazines besides his subscription Nintendo Power. He had he had an issue of EGM 65, which is the biggest issue they ever put out. It was over 400 pages. It was December '94, and I borrowed it from him, and I more or less never gave it back. And it really was a changing moment in my life. It sort of changed everything. It showed me the games that I'd never heard of and stuff, and all this crazy Japanese stuff. Because here's my quirk in this is that I'm very Japan centric when it comes to games, JRPGs, and all the weirdness that comes out is like my main sort of niche. But anyway, so yeah, they had all sorts of weird games in there. They had a whole import section. They had a whole thing about Dragon Ball fighting games. This is before the Dragon Ball series was brought over into North America with any, like, I didn't know what Dragon Ball was, but here was a badass fighting game with these cool characters that was covered. It was first making mention of the 3DO. It was reviewing Flashback on the 3DO, and I didn't even know 3DO existed at this point. I was just blown away. In the import section, I can't remember the name of the game. I'll have to look it up, but they had a really cool game that was a Japanese game that never came over here. It was a shooter. Besides, where you were like a girl in a bunny costume, kind of like a Playboy bunny, and you went and shot at stuff and blew it all up, and it looked really awesome and cool. And the big thing was they had a big feature story on Final Fantasy VI, which is Final Fantasy III on the Super Nintendo, which is my favorite game of all time. And I had never played an RPG of any kind at that point. So when they were talking about like how you had multiple characters you were controlling at one time, I didn't even really know what that meant. And I was like, wow. And like that's what made me rent it. And then Ryan played it with me, and then we got into like a 2 or 3 year span of just renting that game and playing it, and eventually getting further and further and beating it. And I remember the first time I rented it, I didn't even start a new game. I was so dumb. I just picked up some, when you rent games, right? The game files or whoever played it before, right? So I picked it up, and somebody was really far into the game. They were in the world of Ruin. I just started playing the world of Ruin, not knowing what was going on with anything. Saw a bit of the story unfold. For those who really want to know, it's a part where after the world of Ruin, the whole thing is all the characters have been scattered. They all have to find each other again. And there's only 2 or 3 people in your party, and you find the character Edgar, but he doesn't seem to know who you are, and he's calling himself Gerard, and he's going around with a bunch of thieves, and you follow him onto a ship. I remember I did that part. Then I got off the ship, didn't know what to do, got a bunch of random battles, and gave up. But eventually, Ryan and I did start the game at the beginning, blown away. To this day, it's never been surpassed for me, my favorite game of all time. But anyway, so that's a big, huge turning point in my life. So I'm like, oh, Final Fantasy, oh, RPGs, and here we go. That opens up a whole thing. So also around this time, there's talk about, the next generation coming out of the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, and I made a conscious decision to be a gamer at that moment. Ryan was better at games than I was, and Ryan always got the systems before I did. So I made a decision sometime in like '95 that I was going to get a fucking PlayStation because nobody knew what PlayStation was. So, it was a 2-horse race at this point. It was Sega and Nintendo. And I thought it would be really interesting to get this Sony PlayStation. Who knows what it would be like? And I thought that would be a cool thing and make me look cool, I guess. And in the spring of '96, I got it. I got it at Toys R Us. And the first game I got for it didn't even make any sense. I got Discworld. Anybody know Discworld, the Terry Pratchett novels? Based on that, it's this long point-and-click game. Based on that, it's got Eric Idle doing the voice. It's very fun, but it's not exactly what your first experience with the PlayStation should be. Also, because of all the voice work in it, it made huge files. It took up 8 slots in a memory card, and the memory card standard PlayStation 1 memory card had 15 slots. So yeah, you do the math. So anyway, this it's funny because Jay said this was about the time he checked out of gaming for a few years, but this is when it got serious for me. This is the 5th generation. And this is where things really kicked off. I was now buying EGM like every month. I never subscribed. I just bought it. What's the word? That price anyway. Newsstand price. It was about $6.99 Canadian. It might have gotten up to $7.99 at some point. And they really separated. They established themselves as the best in the business. I read Game Fan and Game Pro here and there. Nintendo was basically a kidsy propaganda machine for Nintendo. Not that it was bad or anything. And then there were really short-lived ones that came and went. And the other thing was when I bought my PlayStation, it came with a free subscription for about the first year of a brand new gaming magazine called Next Generation. When I was in Sydney this time, I brought not a whole bunch, but here's one. It's a really cool one. The Big Fight. And it's talking about the 3 systems there. And Next Generation was interesting too because I liked them, but I also kind of didn't like them because the whole thing was Next Generation very much prided itself on being like the most mature magazine out there. It was very much for adults. It's very industry focused. There's a lot of stuff about the industry and fine. So some of that stuff fascinated me, but also bored me at the same time. Because I didn't always want to read all about, what I don't know, what some companies' fiscal reports for the year were and stuff. And also it could get very technical too. When they talked about specs and stuff, they would get right into it. But also some really amazing articles. And anyway, I continued that subscription for about 2 or 3 years. I amassed quite a few of them. And that's how I found out about some more insider stuff. Like I said, it was a big deal. One of the first issues had this big interview with Trip Hawkins, he'd been the head of EA, and then he became the head of 3DO. And he was one of those people that saw himself sort of like as a visionary, and he was always making big, grand pronouncements about the future of the industry. And it's hilarious in hindsight to see how much he got wrong. Although he did get things right too. And of course, 3DO is remembered as a failure itself. But we'll get into that some other time. But anyway, so yeah, it was around this time, the late 90s, where it became. And then, of course, all the hype for the Nintendo 64 was going on in 96, because in September, that was going to be the North American launch. And that meant by that Christmas, 1 million people were going to have it, including like Ryan. And I began to have some doubts, because the 64, I've always had a good track record with Nintendo. And the 64 is more powerful than the PlayStation. And I had some doubts. And I really enjoyed the 64 when it came out and got to play the hell out of it with Ryan. But I guess I never really regretted not owning one. I even, a couple years later, maybe in 98, did like a thing where a friend of mine, not Ryan, but somebody else, did a switch where I traded him my PlayStation for the 64 for a few months, just so I could get some more hands-on time with things like that I'd not gotten to play enough of myself, like Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, which was the first Zelda I ever really paid attention to. So Zelda
not
is another
Pilot
thing.
Wings.
Well, we did play Pilot Wings. We did play Pilot Wings because a lot of people got both games, right? Those were the only 2 games at launch. Like, how do you launch this system? Even at Christmas, those were like still the only 2 games, I think. So yeah, a lot of people got that and Pilot Wings. I still like Pilot Wings. It's a very peaceful, serene game, just flying around. I'm actually kind of dying to play it. So yeah, I'm considering this pretty serious. I'm even thinking, I have aspirations to be a journalist at this point. I'm thinking I want to work for a game magazine when I'm older is kind of what I'm thinking at this point. So I pay a lot of attention to that. So then I go to university, and I can't afford a PlayStation 2 right away, but I get one about halfway through my first year. By this time, the Dreamcast had come, but I had played it a little bit because Ryan and I actually rented the system so we could play Code Veronica. We're both big Resident Evil fans. Nice. I'd like to say we were on the ground floor about that too, because I remember it was Halloween of '96, and I said to Ryan that I was done with trick or treating and I didn't want to do it, and he was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll do it with you." And we rented Resident Evil, not knowing really anything about it, and and just we're blown away by like this amazing game that no one had ever seen pretty much anything like before, unless you had played much of like Alone in the Dark, and still this is much more advanced than Alone in the Dark. Yeah. So that was amazing. I remember the next Halloween we did the same thing. We rented Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which is a top 5 game for me, one of the best games ever. So that was great too. But anyway, like I said, I'm not trying to focus too much on individual games. I'll move ahead. So I bought a PlayStation 2. It was kind of a no-brainer. I had so many good experiences with the PS1. Got a PS2, and there's already killer app for it. The big reason I wanted to play it was the next Metal Gear Solid game, because I love Metal Gear Solid on the PS1 so much, and now I have Metal Gear Solid 2. And of course, just around that time, sort of a new phenomenon was Grand Theft Auto 3. Because Grand Theft Auto 3 was just pure gaming freedom, right? You drove around, did what there were missions, but you could just drive around, create general havoc in a big made city that we hadn't seen on previous systems. They didn't have the power, but now we have like this big, city that you can actually find things in and stuff. So that was a big deal. So like that year, like 2002, I was playing the hell out of that and Sons of Liberty. So then we get into the more awkward period of my life, because what happened was several years later, I was living in my second apartment now with my sister, and I think I've told the story a few times. You guys are sick of it, but I had been dating a girl who broke up with me fairly abruptly, and I just written my last exam that year, so I was really depressed about the breakup. So I didn't even tell my sister I was leaving. I just hopped on a bus and went back to my parents. So then, like, for that month, I was just sort of back at my parents, sort of just like feeling sorry for myself. And sometime during that month, our apartment got broken into, and my sister didn't lose anything. It was all my stuff. They stole 23 of my DVDs, my PS2, all my PS2 games, and I had recently bought, even though it wasn't new anymore, a GameCube, because I felt kind of bad about the whole 64. And it was a cool Platinum Edition GameCube too. And I only had it for about 3 or 4 months before I lost it.
You had all the cool stuff. That's why.
I lost nothing. And what's weird is they stole the GameCube, but they didn't steal the GameCube games. I had 2 GameCube games. I had the Metroid game, Metroid Prime, and I had something else that must still be out there because I never lost it. I can't think what it was, but anyway, that's what set me back. Because suddenly, like, it just seemed so insurmountable. My parents did replace my PS2 not too long after with a nice, they came out with smaller, sleeker ones, and I got one of those. But I don't know. That was finally when I wasn't that I stopped liking games. It was I stopped caring about what was new. Because the only thing I did at this point now was like play PS1 games on the PS2 because it was backward compatible and play the Super Nintendo. I pretty much disconnected. I wasn't reading magazines anymore. I wasn't looking stuff up online because, of course, now the internet's around. That's a big deal. I wasn't doing any of that. I was just sort of playing the same games. Every once in a while, hearing about games are coming out. So there was about a 3-year period there. So this is about 2005 through 2008-ish that I was just sort of the PS3 came out and I ignored it for a while. And then I finally, got back on the horse, got the PS3, and have gone from there. We'll skip ahead to the PS4, which is where I'm at now. And in that time, of course, I had a Game Boy. I got a Game Boy Color, which is when I finally started buying some Game Boy games, like a Pokemon and stuff. Eventually, during my first 2 years of college, I think I gave the Game Boy Color to a friend because I was buying a Game Boy Advance SP, which I love. I'll show that sometime, because the first Game Boy Advance was so different and clunky, but then they made the SP, which was better than in every way, and I was so glad I waited. I got the SP.
I've got that original one.
And I got the Game Boy Advance, which I liked very much too. And I got the PSP. But as I was saying to Jay, I never really got it for any of the new games. Almost all my PSP games are just updated re-releases of earlier games, like Castlevania Symphony of the Night's on there. I got Mega Man X on there. Trying to think. There was a game that I had rented years ago in the 90s when I had a PS1 called Lunar Silver Star Story Complete. They made a new one called an updated version called Lunar Silver Star Harmony, which I love. Love that game by Working Designs. We'll talk about that someday again. My big love of the JRPG Working Designs was a big deal to do with that. And actually, the original version of Lunar, J, was on Sega CD. And I would fucking kill for a Sega CD in that game just to play it. Of course, the PlayStation version was very enhanced. It had a lot of extra stuff. But the original version of it on the Sega CD, one of the big things about being the first CD-based system was that it had cutscenes and stuff. So they had animated, full animation, lush, beautiful animation cutscenes. But anyway, jumping ahead. So yeah, so my PSP was mostly just for kind of retro stuff. Although I bought it as a bundle with the Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker game. I still have the box and everything. So it's a green, it's a dark green, like a forest green PSP because it's sort of military. It's supposed to be the deal. And it came with Peace Walker.
Didn't PSP have the remake of Mega Man X?
Yeah,
it was Mega
called
Man X Maverick Hunter or something.
Yeah. I've got it.
Because there's a Vile mode, you can play the whole game as Vile instead of X, and it plays differently. I've never played it, but again, if you I don't know if you've played that. That's
I've got it. I own it. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
As I said, that's pretty much what my PSP library almost is. It's almost entirely just except for a couple re-releases of games. But I mean, there's so many games. Obviously, there's no point in touching on them because we'll get to them in future episodes and things like that.
The cool thing about the PSP is I think it introduced a lot of North American audiences to Japanese games.
Mm-hmm.
Games that weren't ever previously available. The PSP released a lot of that stuff, and for the North American, not console, audience. But I know audience, but whatever you call it. But
yeah. Strangely enough, the Vita is the only the only Sony system that I've never bought. I bought every other Sony system unless you count an enhanced thing like a PS4 Pro. I've never bought a Vita.
Do you think and I don't know, I'm asking, do you think the Japanese game thing on PSP was because there wasn't a lot of game development in the US, so they were pulling from what was done overseas for this market, or is it just how it worked out? They just were bringing those games over because the markets were opening up?
Probably a little bit of both, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. I mean, that was the other thing about the later 90s was some of the stuff that wouldn't have gotten over here was coming over here. And some of the stuff that was used to be heavily censored was finally not being censored. Like right up to this Final Fantasy, like the translations were a little weird because they were changing things and stuff. Final Fantasy VII finally did away with that, and you could have things like religious stuff in there. Like Nintendo of America's like main function was like censoring games. What's funny is how a few did slip through the cracks. I was going to say, going back in my history, is that Ryan and I, we rented a lot of games from Nintendo and the Super Nintendo. And then even right up to the PlayStation and N64, we rented games. That was a big deal. In fact, Ryan was the one who rented movies. I almost never rented movies. If I went to the rental store, it was to rent a game. So I played lots and lots of games that way, including some games that I kind of like. I rented Bubsy 3D just because I wanted to see how bad it was. And it's one of the worst games ever. I can confirm. And they actually thought that was going to be a good game. But getting back to that, yeah, so I remember years ago, Ryan had rented, this is back in the really old days on the NES, Ryan had rented a game called Monster Party, which is a really cool game where you're a kid with a baseball bat fighting stuff, but then you can switch into a monster. And when you switch, the world switches too. It's a more monstrous world and they attack you. That game got away with a lot of imagery that should have been censored by Nintendo of America under their own thing. Because think about all the stuff they cut out of the Castlevania games, like crosses and stuff. I mean, this game didn't have that, but it had things like skulls and like a bleeding sky. Like it had you can look it up. I'm surprised that stuff slipped through the cracks. Because yeah, Nintendo of America's like main thing in those days was just like, just not ruining the games entirely, but a lot of the times, yeah, just cutting stuff out entirely or changing it. It was hilarious. So Final Fantasy IV, which is 2 on the Super Nintendo, which I also have there in the other room, like there's a whole part in the game where you meet these people and they're part of like a religious sect, and they have like a tower of prayer. In the game, in the translation, they call it like a tower of wishing. So they can't talk about praying; they talk about wishing and stuff like that. Like a well-known spell in Final Fantasy is holy. In the early games, it would be translated as pearl. You couldn't. There's a spell called death, which they changed to doom, stuff like that. So finally, in the late '90s, you're finally seeing good translations and stuff not being cut out. So that was a big deal too. And as I said, I was always super fascinated with things like Neo Geo and stuff, because they talk about like importing games and how I wanted to import games, but it wasn't really logistically that possible. Plus, my parents were already buying me games and stuff. I was going to convince them to spend all this money to import games for me, right? So I finally got to fulfill that lifelong dream a couple years ago when I first got the Switch, because I found out there was a great JRPG kind of reminiscent of Chrono Trigger called I Am Setsuna, and I found out that I Am Setsuna you can get it here, but you can only get it digitally. You can't get a physical release of it here. But it has a physical release in Japan. And the Nintendo Switch, I'm sure as people watching know, doesn't have region locking like most systems. You can play that, so I'll show that sometime too. So I did import the physical version of I Am Setsuna from Japan. I was so thrilled to get it, to finally achieve that lifelong dream of actually importing a Japanese game and being able to play it. It's great.
It's about time we finally have a region-free system.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Oh, that was always such an annoying thing.
Yeah.
Region locking.
Did you guys know anyone that had a Neo Geo? I mean, like I always just looked at it at the glass case at Toys R Us and just, in awe.
See, I never got to see it. Like, I have no memory of seeing any of these things in store, like 3DO, Neo Geo. I might have seen a Jaguar once at Toys R Us, but Toys R Us was here and I didn't live here at the time. So
I only remember seeing them in magazines. Like, I can't even remember I remember Next Gen or Next Generation or whatever the one you showed. I do remember that magazine. And there was a bunch of others. I do remember getting some of those magazines because some of them had suggestive pictures of women in them. They were sort of like comic/video game magazines. And that was part of my motive for buying them, because it was like extremely low budget. Again, they weren't like nude or anything, but it's like it's not like I could go buy a Playboy or something, but I could get this where it's like a girl in a bikini or something.
Right, it was all part of that boom. I said the late '90s, the Japanese anime, comes over. So you'd have like anime babes on a thing, which certainly appealed to me at the time, and games based on anime and all this stuff. I was just drinking all this up. I'm 13, 14, and I'm just loving it, and that's something that's never left. I've still got this crazy love and fascination for all things Japanese. But jumping back into the 90s again, since we had the PC. So yeah, I continued being a PC gamer in the 90s. We had a pretty good computer, and I got games. I did buy games, but mostly I got games from friends, because it was easy to pirate games. So I had Doom 1 and 2, which I played, and I knew all the codes and stuff. In fact, I barely ever played it normally. I just put on God mode so I could kill everything.
So did I.
At the first Wolfenstein. had a really great game called Lost Vikings, which is a really fun game where you play, you switch between 3 different characters, and they each have a different ability to get you through levels. I love that game. My mother and sister were both gamers with me to a certain degree, and they like more like a lot of women. They like more puzzle things, so they were right into Myst. So I never played it back in the day, but I watched them play it. I actually have an enhanced version of Myst on this computer now, and I remember like I suck at it. I'm no good at thinking these things through. I'm a Twitch gamer. I need movement and action. Myst is so slow, but I'm still glad to have it. But anyway, I still would watch them play it. Remember we had some older games. There was another good game. It was like a murder mystery called Murder on the Mississippi. It was kind of like a Hercule Poirot type situation. There's a murder on like a one of those boats going down the Mississippi like in the 1920s, and there's a bunch of like rich people and stuff, and it's really hard to do because once you get to a certain point, like there's traps and stuff, you walk through and like a knife will hit you in the head or the floor will give out. We never got through that. We had this really great game that my sister and I loved playing. It was like Mickey's Space Adventure or something, and it's basically about Mickey Mouse being like an astronaut, and the whole thing is it's one of those games where you can type in the things for him to do. And I mean, we never once died, but there were ways to die. Like you could run out of air and stuff like that. And it was a game that you had to think about. And it really, the only way you can really beat the game is do what we did. Because before it starts in his house, and you need to really look at everything in his house and take as much stuff as you can. Because when you're on the space missions, you can use that stuff. Like I remember at one point you get captured on like a moon, and there's like these weird shaggy aliens, and they're gonna kill you. But then you give them a scarf that you had, and they're happy, and they let you go. It was a really fun game. So yeah, it didn't have movement. It was just like you make a decision, and then it would like the screen would change and show you the result of what happened. But we never died, which made me happy that we could play through it. We always made the right decisions, which I thought was cool. So yeah, well, played quite a few. So right up into the 90s, I was very much. I mean, yeah, I played my PlayStation and Nintendo a lot more, but I spent a lot of time playing down in the basement, playing on the computer just as much. But yeah, eventually it started moving into where, games had very specific requirements now. Like I missed out on Quake entirely.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but that was like that's when it was starting to get a little more advanced. My
Quake and Heretic. I like that a lot too. That was kind of between Doom and Quake.
I played Hexen. Hexen's
Diablo was
the
a
first
big one,
version where
wasn't
you
it?
use swords and axes and stuff. Yeah, Diablo was a big one that I missed out on too. Like I played it now, but back when it first came out, it was a big deal. I didn't play it. So yeah, just when you were making that big graphical leap around like the start of the 2000s, that's when I kind of stopped being a PC gamer because I just didn't have the.
3? Is that the current one, or maybe even a 4 now? But I know people love that game.
And in my early university days, I did have some versions of like Red Alert that I played on my computer. I had a Dell computer. I played, Command and Conquer Red Alert. Those strategy games. Those are fun. I think the first one I ever played of those was actually a port for the N64, and it ran super slow, but we still played it and liked it. So even though I never owned the 64, I played a lot of it because of Ryan and another friend. So I have all those, GoldenEye memories and other things, and as I said, for somebody that was not a Zelda person, it was the first Zelda for me. I kind of ignored the Legend of Zelda, which is, for old school Zelda fans, still the best game ever created. I'm like, Final Fantasy VI beats it, For whatever reason, in Nintendo Power, they always had like a top 10 list, and it was like number one like every year, or every single issue it was number one. Like for like 300 issues, it was always at number one. It was Legend of Zelda. Like I don't know how long it lasted.
We should talk about the Wizard at some point, by the way.
I think I honestly do a live commentary on it. We could actually make it on this channel, actually. So that's a good idea.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
I hope that's still on Netflix. It's been on my Netflix for quite a while. I bet you it's gone now just because I want it.
There's a riff tracks for that too, Cole. I know you were checking some of those out. That's a really funny riff tracks, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I've watched a few riff tracks the last little while. They're very good.
The most epic commercial ever made.
Yeah.
Power Glove.
And the Power Glove.
I saw that. Ryan and I saw that in theaters, man. Not back then, but a few years ago.
Yeah.
Man,
I may have seen it in the theaters back then.
It was a big crowd, and they did that whole Nintendo Armageddon thing, like where the two players had to play, and they put it up on the screen. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
they
wow.
Yeah, they did that beforehand. They had like a draw, and the two people went up and played Mario 3, and they projected it up onto the theater screen. Oh, it was so cool.
So here's something random for you, but I promise it's related. The girl from The Wizard is an actress named Jenny Lewis, who doesn't really have a prolific career, but Do you remember a few years back, Bill Murray randomly came out with like a Christmas special on Netflix? Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, I watched it. It's not very good.
The girl in it is Jenny Lewis. She's like a waitress at that weird. Like I'm trying to remember the plot of this thing, but it's like Bill Murray at some restaurant. The redhead waitress who sings with him, like she actually has a nice voice, but that's the girl from The Wizard.
I barely remember.
Totally random, but
it was confusing because you had certain celebrities just playing themselves, and you had other celebrities playing characters. So it just was weird, you know. It's just like, oh, is that supposed to be like Emma Stone as herself, or is that Emma Stone? You know, I probably won't ever watch it again. I just watch it because I love Bill Murray, but it's a pretty boring thing.
That entire special feels like Bill Murray was like in an elevator with Ted Sarandos or whatever, and it was just like, "Hey, you should come do something with us." Sure.
Yeah. Here's Miley Cyrus. Here you go.
Yeah, here you go. Anyway, I'm sorry, I took us off track.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, that's cool. I've never really checked up on her. He touched my breast. That seems fair, right? The guy is only doing his job, trying to bring lost kids back to their parents, and he gets accused of being a pedophile, like right out in public. Oh, disproportionate. What's the word I'm trying to say? Disproportionate retribution.
Yeah.
There. But he's still the bad guy. He's the bad guy because he's trying to bring the kids back before. But yes, The Wizard, I would love for us to do a live commentary on that. So, as we said, this show's going to be a few different things. But anyway, I'm not trying to jump all over the place here. I'm just trying to think. So, yeah, really, so my niche really would be JRPGs, like the Final Fantasy series. I'm a big Resident Evil fan. I've played those. I'm one of the only people that can keep the story straight because I read it and play it so much that I can follow the timeline pretty well. Most people, they don't know what's going on. How could they? It's so fucking confusing.
You'll have to explain it to me sometime.
Still never beat 7. 8's looking really great though. I'm sure you've seen some of the footage of 8. It looks really cool. It looks a lot better than 7. 7's not really my thing. I give them credit for. But anyway, I love a side scroller type thing like a Castlevania. I was always a big Castlevania fan, and Symphony of the Night remains the high benchmark. They've made so many wannabes of that game on like the Game Boy Advance. Ryan bought like all of them. I own one. There's like Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance. There's so many. Ryan owns them all. Like I should borrow some sometime and play through them. I was a big Mega Man fan too. Played the hell out of that series. And it's funny, like Mega Man X is again once so much more of that time. Like this is 1993. This is the year Superman was killed. Batman's back is broken. The Punisher becomes really popular. Venom gets his own series. It's all the Gen X guys. It's grunge. It's the height of grunge. It's all that stuff that our generation grew up loving. So of course, Mega Man gets the same treatment. He goes from cutesy blue guy to like anti-hero in a dark, forbidding future in a post-apocalyptic world.
Black fingernails too, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure. Probably. No, nobody's safe from that. But again, really appealed to me. I love Mega Man X 1, 2, 3, and eventually 4. But that came a lot later. I actually own 4. And Mega Man 7 and 8. I remember renting. I remember that was one of the times like I actually brought my PlayStation over to Ryan's house because he only owned a 64 at the time, so we could play Mega Man 8, which we'd rented. And by that time we'd already been a little burnt out on the X series, so we were kind of glad for a sort of return to that. And Mega Man 8 with this horrific, awful, hilarious voice acting, which is another thing we can talk about. In the late 90s, we finally had voice acting in games, and like 99% of it was terrible. Awful dialogue, awful voice acting. Of course, the most remembered, of course, is the original Resident Evil. So bad that it's just like they reference it in later games because it's just so hilariously iconic. But so those are sort of my adventure games. Later I got into stuff like Uncharted. I was always have a love-hate relationship with fighters, so I always think I would really like to get really good at fighters, but I don't have the patience to do it. So I sort of dabbled in fighters. My favorite fighter is Street Fighter Alpha 2. I wish I owned more fighters, but the problem is I get bored with them on my own. So they sometimes they can't really be seen as worth the money. Like there's a great Street Fighter collection that I would love to get on Switch, but the Switch controller is shit for that. So
My problem is I'm very competitive, but I'm not good. So I just really wind up getting extremely pissed off. So I don't even try.
I can relate to that, Jay. Yeah. I think that's why I sort of backed out of the shooter space in a major competitive way, because I was getting so mad playing like Call of Duty games. Because there were people out there who were like maximizing their input lag and like hooking, like, you know, instead of Wi-Fi, like plugging directly into like they were just faster on their connection. So like on my screen, I would think I'm shooting them, but then they had enough time to like turn and shoot me. I would get so angry. Like I had to stop doing it in a serious way, or I was like my head was going to explode.
I think of you remember Jim on The Office when he was in the other branch. They were all playing in Call of Duty, something like that. And he was just so bad. He was just like facing a bush, like jumping, and then he got shot in the back of the head or something. That's
funny. Yeah. So yeah, I'm just thinking that, and of course that's not my area. As much as I enjoyed things like Doom early on, and of course the big one was GoldenEye. I never really was a first-person shooter thing. I played them with other people. There were a few that I liked. I remember renting the first Medal of Honor game. That was a really fun World War II era, and they made a whole series of them. But I played maybe one or two of the sequels. But yeah, so that's one of the things, like blind spots. I was never a big sports gamer. I played various NHL games, and you know, I've had time with things like NBA Jam and NBA Jam TE. I've played some of the FIFA soccer games. My favorite soccer game is Mega Man Soccer. Oh my god, I wonder how much that goes for on eBay. I would pay so much for that. I love Mega Man Soccer. That's a game I rented multiple times. I loved that game. So like I said, fighters I'm sort of half in, half out. It sort of depends like on my mood and what I'm doing. I was always Street Fighter over Mortal Kombat. I like Mortal Kombat, but I was always, again, I went for the more flashy Japanese sort of style, I guess is what it was.
You guys remember a game called Arch Rivals?
I remember Rival Schools.
Arch Rivals, I don't remember what system it was out on, but I played the arcade. It's like a cartoony basketball game where it's not real players; they're made up. They just, you know, they like poke people in the eye and stuff, and just weird stuff that doesn't actually happen in games. But
that's funny.
I went on vacation one summer with my parents. I don't remember where it was, but they had an arcade in the hotel we were staying at, and I played that damn game the entire time we were there. Like I was just down there playing that game, so I got pretty good at it.
Ryan had an NES game, a baseball game, where you were like robots playing baseball. I can't remember what it was called.
I think I played that.
Did you ever play NHL Hits with a Z?
Yeah, I did.
Ever have that one?
Yeah,
it was kind of like the NBA Jam version of hockey. Because like sometimes if you'd hit a guy just right, like it would be like he'd get like covered with like electricity all over his body and he'd like fly through the glass. I don't know. I kind of like that game.
You know, it's gone now, but because it's just, you know, it's the same thing as like the other EA ones. You know, it's NHL 18, NHL 19. But there used to be, alongside that, there was also a series called NHL Face Off. And I had NHL Face Off 98 on the PlayStation, and that was a good one. Of course, the original game is Blades of Steel on the NES. Again, that was an early game I used to play a lot with friends. That was a great game, because if you got into fights, how it worked is like whoever lost the fight would go with the penalty box. That's how it worked. If you lost the fight, your team got the penalty, which is pretty damn funny. But the holy grail of hockey games has always been the Sega Genesis version of NHL 93. It even has that immortal scene in the movie I Hate So Much, Slingers. They're like talking about making Wayne Gretzky's head bleed. But to this day, that is like considered like the greatest hockey game ever. And Jeremy Roenick in that game can do no wrong. He's like super overpowered. Like he's better than Gretzky or Lemieux or Bure. It's just like if you had JR, he could just shoot from anywhere, it would go in. It's pretty cool. But
I'm gonna post a link to this Arch Rivals game I was talking about in the chat.
So my sports stuff is kind of spotty. Obviously, I never played football or anything. I played things like Mario Tennis, I suppose. I don't think any of us were like into like flight sims or mech games. I was interested in mech games, but they were so fucking complicated.
Yeah.
Things like Heavy Gear and stuff like that. They were like, I remember renting one years ago on the PlayStation 1, and like it was so complicated I couldn't do anything. Some of them were so complicated that the game came with its own big, huge arcade style controller with a button setup. That's how complicated some of these mech games were. So there was stuff I wanted to get into, but so part of the RPG is like the strategy thing. So, I love Final Fantasy Tactics, but I do deeper cuts. So yeah, I'm the person on the show that if you want to talk about Tactics Ogre, or if you want to talk about Suikoden, stuff like that, I can do that. So, but I've got blind spots, and we all have our preferences. But I like a lot of the mainstream games that are big series. notably like a Resident Evil, which became a huge franchise. The Batman Arkham games is a huge franchise.
Yeah.
Those games made me really happy because finally the Batman experience was actually like in the comics. Like after so many years of playing side-scrolling beat-em-ups that were so unsatisfying.
I can't believe I didn't bring. I should have brought. Again, we could do a show just on the Arkham series. Like I remember. In fact, that was one of the few games I actually played on PS3, and I still liked it even though I hated that controller. Just because, like you say, it's like you are Batman. Like they found a way to sort of just build the experience of what it would be like to be Batman in a game, and in a really good story. And it had all of like the DC animated universe voices. It really didn't have
Kevin Conroy,
Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, and
I
then
didn't
the
actually
original Harley
start
Quinn.
with. I didn't actually start with Arkham Asylum. I started with Arkham City, and then I had to play Arkham Asylum later. I started with Arkham City. But yeah, incredible games. And of course, I'm really looking forward to the new Spider-Man game. That'll be cool. But Tomb Raider is interesting because I never owned Tomb Raider, but I rented it several times. I don't know where I lost track of it, but I own the PC version of Tomb Raider, and I remember that's actually I have more experience playing it on the PC than the PlayStation because I never owned it on PlayStation. So that was a big deal too. That was like something that helped solidify PlayStation because they had like their answer to Mario kind of in Lara Croft. And again, I read about it in an issue of this before it ever came out. So I felt great because I was really ahead of people. The internet was around at this time. It was very, different and primitive, and not everybody was using it. But yes, Joe, I agree. I really like the reboot games. I've got all three of them. And that's when I finally came back to it because I think Tomb Raider lost its way for so many years. They kept making weird sequels that I wasn't part of. But then they saw Uncharted and they were like, oh, that's what we were supposed to do. It's kind of how I feel about the new Tomb Raider games. They were just like, oh, just do what Uncharted does, kind of thing. So yeah, I like lots of big things, but I like a lot of obscure games, especially like the JRPG type things. And, nowadays there are so many independent games, I can't keep track of them. So people are often always recommending me this or that. And I'm like, I've never heard of this because, it's from some tiny startup company. So I'm sure so there's just so many games, but I'm trying to think like what narrows me down. I mean, RPGs, fighters, kind of. Racing games, never really, but I enjoy a racing game when it's good, but it's never been like a passion of mine. Strategy game kind of ties into the RPG type thing, but a lot of the more famous adventure games, things like from Mario to Lara Croft to Devil May Cry, all those bases being covered for sure. Really like horror games, but it's hard to make good ones. I mean, Resident Evil was great because it helped really usher in an era of horror games that have been around, stuff like Silent Hill, which I haven't played all of, but I've definitely spent a lot of time on Silent Hill. I still need to buy like a Silent Hill collection, so I own it.
Look, let me tell you,
Silent Hill 2 is really great. That's probably my favorite Silent Hill.
Let me tell you a good horror game. They made two of them that are really good. The Alan Wake games. Actually, I think they made 3 of them, but the third one was only downloadable. Yeah, Alan Wake, similar to like Silent Hill, something like that.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Those are really good, and also The Ties That Bind are really good. I've got those on the original Xbox. They made 2 of those as well. Those are really, really fun games.
Right. So obviously, I've never owned any version of Xbox, and I don't plan to. So stuff that only came out on Xbox, I don't really have much experience with beyond a little bit of Halo. I'm not a first-person shooter person, and I don't like playing games online because most people. I love playing games in the room with my friends, but I don't like playing with anonymous people. I realize it can be fun stuff, but most of the games I like are single-player games where it's just I don't need people intruding on the experience anyway. I don't want anybody around when I'm doing the Final Fantasy VII remake. I just want to be completely tuned into it, So there's people that do esports and more online stuff, and so some of those big phenomenons don't touch me at all. Like I'm not touched at all by Fortnite. Never played it. I'm not touched at all by that. What's that other really popular one? Again, you run around shooting. There's a bunch of characters. There's lots of porn for it.
Oh, Overwatch.
Overwatch. Like I played Overwatch like once in Ryan's basement like 2 years ago, and I don't know. See. It's a big phenomenon. I'm not dissing. I'm just saying it holds no appeal for me. I don't care.
It's not bad. I never really could get into it though.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched some like Overwatch tournaments on TV, and that's not fun for me either.
No.
That's the other thing. Like, I love gaming and I take it very seriously, but I've never been the type of person that I'm not going to watch people play on Twitch. Twitch just makes me angry because I feel like I'm better than most of the people on Twitch. There's obviously an echelon I can't touch that are really, really good, but I feel like I'm better than a lot of people. And I'm not going to go on some sexist rant and sink the channel, but you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of girls on there that get clicks just because they're girls, I think, and they don't even know anything about the game. But whatever, I'm going to leave that alone and not be a jerk. But yeah, so I don't watch people play games. I don't mind watching a friend come over and I'll watch it. Like, Ryan and I pass the controller, we play through it. That's fun because we're involved. But no, I don't watch some random person play a game. And some games are so close and important to me. This is where I'm really weird. Like, some games are so personal to me, more than movies. Like, this is more than movies, that I don't even want to know anybody else's opinion on it, even if they like it. Like this Final Fantasy remake that has come out, I don't watch anybody talk about it on YouTube or anything because I don't care. It's me in the game. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I don't want to share an experience and say, oh yeah, me too. No, it's just me in the game. Like, I care so much about it. I don't want to hear anybody else's interpretation of a scene or anything. Nothing. So some games are just so personal for me that, like, I don't look up anybody else's experience with it. I don't watch anybody play it. I don't watch anybody talk about it. I don't want to see anybody's comments about it. Nothing. All I know is how I feel about the game, and that's all that matters. So, yeah, that's the other thing. It's like, as much as I love movies, and I've talked about it, games touch me more, really. I mean, obviously, there's only a few, but the ones that do, they're just more personal because I am playing the game and the time and work you put into it, I guess. So it's very gratifying to finally have a channel about it.
There are some playthroughs that I watch, but it's like I'm very specific about it. Like, there's a guy, I wish I could remember his name. I'll look it up. There's a guy who does like playthroughs of the Batman Arkham games, and he plays on like the hardest mode, so you don't even have like the indicators for like when to block and do stuff. Yeah. And he doesn't get touched. It's really fun to watch him just because like he's so like I want to be better so that I can be like.
Oh, I have watched stuff like that, like just crazy skill. Yeah, I'll watch that. I watch stuff like that.
Yeah,
the Rad, is that it?
I don't think so.
That's what Joe Bob said in the comments. I don't know.
I don't think that's like it's like the Arc. It's something like Arkham Videos. It's like a really ho-hum name, but the guy who's like publishing the content, it's just he's super good. Like,
I mean, I've had sequences like that where I couldn't get touched, but it's hard to do consistently.
Yeah, it's hard to like do the whole because like so Arkham. What was the Arkham Origins?
Yeah,
like that game. I like that game, but it's kind of even buggy. So like that's the thing. Like he's so good that even the game that's kind of buggy in the fighting, he still doesn't get touched. I give him a lot of credit. Like it just those are fun to see how someone who's like. And then there's also videos, and it's not the same guy, but I've seen videos of like Arkham Knight, where like the superpowered Batman who has all the gadgets. They basically like they don't fight any of the bad guys in like a stealth encounter. They take everybody down exclusively with like gadgets and like take down environmental stuff. It's crazy like how these guys architect the situation to be able to take all the stuff down. But anyway,
I try to do that. But yeah, every once in a while when there's a challenge to use a specific gadget, it can get annoying because I'm just like, I can't make it work, But sometimes I pull it off beautifully, and I'm like, I wish somebody saw that. So yeah, that's true. But you're right about being buggy because I mean, Origins is weird too. Like mine was buggy. Like mine sometimes would jump in a cutscene. It would jump.
Yeah.
It would skip a part. And it sets the tone early because you have that very early fight with Deathstroke, which is a difficult fight. So
it's
early
a really
game,
hard
right?
fight. Yeah.
You have to really get the timing down to do it. And like I remember, like after sort of blazing through Arkham City without much trouble, like getting really frustrated with that fight at first. I mean, once you've sort of figured out, you get it figured out. But especially, if you're doing it on a harder difficulty and you don't have like the prompts, you really have to memorize it.
And there's guys, there's just the other. I've heard complaints about generally just the fighting in that game that something because that game wasn't developed by Rocksteady Studios. That was done by WB Montreal.
Yeah,
and it was something like they were using the game engine from Arkham City, but like somehow like the fighting engine wasn't available, so they had to like rebuild it from scratch. And so the fights in that game just don't flow as well. Like, I find in that game, like, you start, like, getting like, some combos going, and then you spend, like, the next 12 moves blocking, because it's like you keep getting, like, the counters come up, and anyway, we don't need to get into the weeds on this, but it just doesn't flow right.
Ryan's in the chat here, and I just wanted to bring up something that he was talking about. That was probably like 6 months ago now. I lose track of time, but Mike Matei put out I don't know, it was just a tweet, or maybe he did a video or something talking about, you know, when Nintendo, they had, you know, the big catalog of the original like NES and, you know, Super NES games, and they all have like save states in them now, to where, you know, games that, you know, we played on those systems, where, you know, if you die, you just go back to the very beginning of the game. Now, you know, you can get a save state. How do you guys feel about that? I
guess it varies on person to person. I don't think it's very fair or nice to, like, just, you know, say everybody sucks, you didn't really beat the game. I mean, I kind of agree with it, but I don't think there's any point in, like, saying it.
I like it, because I honestly think these are games, right? The point of the game is to have fun. Like, you're playing to, like, I understand, like, a game can be difficult, but I feel like a game that, like, punishes you so severely that, like, all of your progress is eliminated and you're sent back. Like, I don't know. Like, that's just really, I like that they've kind of improved like, that's bad experience. That's bad, like, that's a bad customer experience, right? Bad UI. So I kind of like that they've updated them to include that.
I'm kind of split on it, because, I mean, there's part of me that thinks, you know, I mean, you guys remember, like, pausing a game and going to, like, eat dinner or whatever, you know, and coming back. Because you had to, you know. I mean, it's like, it's character building. I think, you know, that I think, you know, we don't understand the patience and the frustration, you know, of that. Now games are much easier than they were when we were kids, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, we grew up on tough games. I mean, Ryan and I would just go at something like Castlevania 3, and that would take forever. It would take a lot of hammering into it. Like I said, I agree with the sentiment. I just felt like the way he put it was sort of kind of being a jerk about it. Because I don't care. I'm not going to tell other people how to play, I guess. I feel like he's telling other people how they should play. I just know what's good for me, and that works. Yeah. Like I said, I agree with what he's saying, but I don't agree with putting it out there in that way, I guess.
I mean, here's the thing. Mike Matei is very fucking good at games. Like, those classic side-scrolling things, he is amazing. Like, way better than I could ever even imagine it being. So
I know, to me, this sounds like he's a bit insecure and he wants to be recognized for his skills or something.
Him saying that is much different than me saying that, because I'm not good at games. I'll tell you straight up. I love to play them, but I'm not good at them.
I just think it's a difference in technology, because, like, the Mega Man games, they had save codes. So clearly they were trying to build into the game the ability to to keep your progress. And so I think for some of these games, it was just a question of technological limitation. There wasn't enough memory to save your spot. So I don't know. I tend to think that it's not like those games were like that because they were trying to be super hard. I think they were like that because they couldn't be different. And so now that we have the capability of introducing save points, I don't know. Again, he's entitled to his opinion, but
I think a lot of those games, if they could have built in a way to save more or whatever, they probably would have, because they want, at the end of the day, especially this is before it's $1 billion industry, you know, they want games to be accessible. They want people to like it. And that, you know, would turn a lot of people off. But I mean, it's funny, like, to think that I was more patient back then, but I guess it's because of the way games have evolved, right? And that because nowadays I'll boot up like a Nintendo game and die very quickly, and I'll be like, you know, the hell with this kind of thing. I have forced my way through a few games in the last year or two, but it wasn't always fun. It was more just to say that I did it.
Maybe I'm just an old man.
Some of them, you know, I'm never going to beat Ghosts and Goblins. That's just not happening.
Oh God. Maybe I'm just an old man, but the current Mario games, like New Super Mario Brothers, and like those games are hard. Like, there are some levels in those games, like, I will spend a lot of lives to get through it, just because it's like you need to, like, bounce and jump and move a certain way to get through, like, sections of those levels. And I don't know, like, it's pretty hard. But they also, like, for little kids, they actually provide, like, an easy mode where, like, they really can't die. Like, there's, like, a little bubble that'll, like, carry them through the level if they die too much. But I don't know. Some of those games are hard. And I don't know if that's just me getting older and I don't have the patience for it. I don't have the timing down. But
I don't know. I haven't played some of those. I mean, the Switch game was pretty easy. I was surprised how quickly I beat it, the Switch Mario. I mean, it's still really good. That's Odyssey. Odyssey's still really good, but I mean, I got through it much faster than I got through 64, for instance.
I beat no. I'm talking about the 2D game. Yeah, so Odyssey I beat, and that was okay. But I mean, like, it was like Switch New Super Mario Brothers or whatever they call it.
Yeah, I haven't
played that yet. Version. That one's hard. Like, or at least I thought so. I don't know. Maybe I'm just bad.
Yeah, I mean, I got to play that for like 5 seconds.
Yeah,
it's another game that won't drop in price, right? It's a Nintendo first party, so it just won't drop in price. It's like 5 years old, and it's like $79.99.
That's some of the games, Cole, you probably miss on the Wii and the Wii U.
Right. Oh, I forgot to mention that I did buy a Wii, and the main reason I bought a Wii was to play like Super Nintendo games on it. And my Wii also was backward compatible, so I can play the GameCube games on it. So I don't really have very many Wii games, but I play GameCube games, and I have a few, and including that's how for instance, those 64 games. Like I have Star Fox 64, Mario 64, and Ocarina of Time. I have them all on my Wii, which is great.
Star Fox 64, like,
love that.
That might be. I mean, other than like Mario. Well, no, because even Mario 3, like, it's still a linear game. But I liked how in Star Fox 64, like, based on your performance and like which way like you went in levels, like you would unlock different paths and like unlock a different ending. Like, that was one of the first games, at least that I played, that had that. And I just thought that was so cool because like it increased the playability because there was like different, like you could just take like the regular path. Oh yeah. If you beat levels in a certain way, like there were levels you could constantly uncover. Like, it took me forever to get to there's like a level where you have to defend Star Fox's like base ship. I forget what it was called, but like I didn't play that level for a long time because I didn't like get the conditions just right in the levels to like play it. But I thought that was like really cool.
Yeah, that was a game where I would beat it and then just immediately start it again.
Yeah,
I love that game.
Yeah,
and again, for a long time I didn't own it. I had to play it like Ryan's house and Matthew's house and stuff. But I still got quite a bit of time with it. But that's actually a game I'm really good at too. Even though I didn't own a 64 back in the day, I'm really good at Star Fox. I've just logged a lot of time with it, I guess. I haven't played it in a while, but I could jump back in pretty easily.
I don't know if I ever played any of the Star Foxes.
I was a big fan of the first Star Fox too, which I used to own. I own Star Fox Weekend now, but we won't talk about that. But
I know what it is, what it's all about, and it was like really good graphics, right? When it first came out.
It used the Super FX chip. And speaking of which, I own the other game, the other game to use it. I own my favorite racing game, Stunt Race FX, which is the other one. I own that on Super Nintendo. I got that not way back in the day, but I got it maybe like 10 years ago or something. It's not a great copy because it doesn't always start, but hopefully I can boot it up. But I love that game. But yeah, the same sort of graphics. In fact, there's even a part that shows like the Star Fox R-Fighter or R-Wing or whatever flying by in one of the stages. But yeah.
So is that bridging the gap between the Super NES and 64?
I mean, I guess it's the closest that it is because it is 3D graphics, right?
It's 3D, yeah.
It's extremely primitive 3D, but it is 3D. I mean, when it came out, just like when Donkey Kong Country came out, I think those both came out in like '93, and I think a lot of people were shocked the system was capable of doing that. You know?
Look, yeah.
I think Donkey Kong Country was like the fastest selling game of all time at the time.
That was a fun game too.
I'm dying to. They're finally getting released on the first one's getting released on the Switch library on the online, but that's another one that I own on the Wii. I need the second one. I haven't played the second. My second one's my favorite, and I haven't played it in like 20-some years. It's killing me. I love the second one where you're Diddy and Dixie. It's got a real pirate theme to it. The levels are incredible. But just trying to think of other stuff that I don't know. But I guess I've pretty much covered it. A lot of it is, a lot of the stuff I don't know is some of the most popular stuff in this day, stuff like Call of Duty or Overwatch. I know, but I still think I'm pretty relevant in the gaming world, regardless. I just watch that stuff go by.
even stuff I'm not into, I know about, to a certain degree.
And I mean, people can make up their own idea of what a gamer is. I mean, I'll always consider my game. It's funny. One of the issues I have of this is it has a quiz called "You Are Not a Hardcore Gamer If." It's a really cool quiz I took back in the day, but it's just for fun. Right? It's just a joke. And I mean, most of the stuff that was in this, like people today couldn't have it because some of it's like really old school, right? Because it's from like 1996.
I guess it's all relative, right? Because like among my group of friends with the original Halo, even if I wasn't the best, I was like, there was me and one other guy who were like maybe like neck and neck, because like you'd get into like some levels where it's like we always played without shields. We always and I think in Halo 2 and the other games they called it SWAT team mode, but we always turned off shields because we started getting annoyed with shields. We just thought it was more fun to like, this way your pistol would be like a one headshot, another thing. But when I got to college, we figured out a way. It was really cool to like, because remember how the Xboxes, you could link them together? You remember that? Because we would do Xbox parties.
That's what I was going to say.
So I'd bring my Xbox, my buddy would have his Xbox, and you could use an Ethernet cable and have like an 8-person think, wow, 8 people, right? You have an 8-person multiplayer. And but we figured out a way to do that on like the college intranet. Like for my dorm building, we figured out a way that like you could plug it in, and I forget like it was actually relatively simple. But anyway, I played with some guy there, and I learned how quickly like you think I'm good. Like I wasn't good at all. This one dude, like if I just like poked my head out, like I was dead. Like so it was all relative, and I thought I was good. So yeah.
I mean, I don't know what to compare.
I was a gamer. I wasn't really.
Yeah, I don't know what to compare this to, but like Ryan and I, the group of friends we were in when we played GoldenEye, we were better than anybody outside that group that we played with, because they would come in and we would destroy them, and they would also be baffled by our very specific rules that we had. Like we had some of the rules. Like one rule was easy, was you didn't shoot anybody who was unarmed and stuff like that. That you just didn't do that. But we also made up rules just to customize the gameplay ourselves. Like we would make up conditions for the game and stuff. And a lot of these people, they weren't used to doing that. They were just used to free-for-alls and shooting whenever they wanted. And even if they played that way, we still steamrolled them because we were a lot better than them. So I don't know how good we really were, but anybody outside our little group that came to play, we were better then.
We started doing that in the Friday the 13th game. Just because it's so repetitive. Like we started this mode where you could talk to Jason, so be like, all right, Jason, give us like 3 minutes to fortify before we're all in one house, and then he would come in and just destroy us usually. But it was fun.
Yeah, I feel bad I missed out on that.
We would Friday that was like for a while. God, Piz was fucking. He would always kill me first, and he was just a really good Jason. Like that was the thing. Like Piz was a good. Like you want to talk about gamers? I think Piz is one, because when he was Jason, like look out, like he would wreck people pretty bad. But we had some fun times on that game because just the way the game worked. If you got a good group, it was just like you'd have fun talking in the chat. You'd have fun like when you're in the game, like, and people would cooperate, because that was a big part. Like I think at least how the game kind of worked, Cole. But like, to really succeed at the game as a counselor, you needed to work together with other counselors. Like, yes, I'm sure there were the Uber players who could probably do it all by themselves, but like for the game to really work and play as I think the makers intended, all the counselors needed to like strategize and like have people doing certain things. And make sure you're kind of covering and watching for Jason. And when you got a game like that, it was just a blast.
It was.
Plus, since it didn't work sometimes, like a lot of the time, it was also cool just because, like, if you think about it, Jay, like you, Orc, and I would like just be sitting on like the wait screen for like, hours at a time, talking about life. Just like, so how are your kids doing? Yeah.
I knew Piz was really good because I watched one of his videos where he's playing as Jason. And I don't know how it worked. Maybe you can explain it. But some guy that he was playing against had some sort of hack and was cheating, and Piz still killed him anyway. and the guy got really mad. I don't know, but you can find that he put that video up.
It
I don't know
was-
what the hack was. He had some sort of hack that he
Well-
was using to cheat, but Piz killed him anyway, and he was super pissed.
It was really well. I don't know that it ever stopped being buggy. I mean, heck, I think it's buggy to this day. But there were certain things that people were doing, like in the early times, like on the Packanack level. And so Packanack was the campsite from Friday the 13th Part 2. Hey, Friday the 13th movie reference here. We got it in this show too. But like there was a way that like you could like clip yourself onto the roof of the cabin, which wasn't a place you could just go. But somehow, like, people fit, and so Jason couldn't get up there. Like, there was no way for him to clip his way up there. So, like, the only thing he could really do would be, like, throw knives or something. I think some of the Jasons could do that. It was just really annoying. It was kind of like, play the game. I hated that kind of crap. Like, Halo, you want to talk about days of frustration? Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. The friggin' guys with the goddamn 1887 shotguns who would like put on the quick running perk. It's like this gun that's literally over 100 years old. Apparently it can shoot 100 yards, and it like, why didn't we just send all of our soldiers to Afghanistan with these things? Because apparently they would have no problems if that's what they were using. Like, I hated that. Anyway, I'm sorry. See, you can hear the rage coming out. This is why I stopped playing those games publicly.
By the way, I'll talk about a shooter that may bring me back into the fold a little bit, and Jay knows it's what the fuck is it called? You know, there's 3 of them. Oh my God, BioShock. You know, I was really pleased with the BioShock. Great story, great atmosphere. You know, I love it. The first one I played was actually the third one, BioShock Infinite, and it came with the first one like packaged in with it. So that was kind of weird. But they're both like spectacular games. I still don't actually have played the second one. I'd like to get the collection on PS4 at some point and play through them all again. But just wonderful atmosphere and really good. So that's the kind of thing it takes for me to like a shooter. I like a story and it's a gimmick, something that makes it different. I love the worlds they created. They were really cool. So, and I just bought that on a whim, that BioShock Infinite. Like I'd heard about it. I didn't even really know much about it. But really great stuff. So I'm gonna play that again soon when I finally get my PS3 running again.
Did you ever play Destiny? Bungie made Destiny, and they made Destiny 2 as well.
No, but that was supposed to be like
it was on PlayStation 4.
Yeah, that's supposed to be a big perk for buying a PS4, right? There was a big Destiny. You get a special white PlayStation with the Destiny.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I didn't play it, but it looks pretty cool.
It's funny. Like the first game got knocked at the very beginning because the story was pretty bad. Like it's not that the story was bad; it was just kind of non-existent. It was really vague, and there was a lot of nouns like you have to go find the wizard and you have to find like the artifact. But I don't know. It played really well. I liked it.
Bungie, called the company that did the first until Halo Reach, I believe.
They did Halo 1 through Reach, right?
Cool.
But yeah, I mentioned it because it was on both Xbox and PlayStation, and at least at the beginning, PlayStation had some sort of like exclusive agreement with them, so like all of the new like DLC or new content would appear on PlayStation first. I don't know if it's
talk
still
about
like
that sometime too. I mean, DLC is, I mean, some of it's good, but how many games have just turned into like, you know, pay loot boxes and all this stuff? I hate all that stuff. I hate it.
BioShock 2
EA
really good DLC. Medusa. Really good DLC for BioShock.
There is good DLC. I'm not dismissing at all. I'm just talking about some of those games. You know, like you have to unlock this pack, and we'll give you some skins and some guns. Like, you know, fuck all that. Because that's again the old school I come from. I pay for a game once, thanks. I don't pay for it again and again.
I kind of liked. Well, so Spider-Man on PlayStation, I kind of liked. I didn't mind paying for like the post-game stories.
No, that's fine. I'm talking about like. And at least within that, you know, you unlock costumes by things you did. You didn't pay for them, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, I'm fine with that. I like those stories. I mean, more content is good. And at least they feel, you know, they're not huge, but they at least feel somewhat substantial.
Yeah, and I didn't think they were overpriced. I mean, to me, that's the key.
Some definitely are.
DLC is
Some
like...
definitely
exactly.
Are.
Right. Sometimes it just doesn't feel like the price point is right for what you're getting. But I thought the Spider-Man stuff was pretty good, and maybe it was just because I really liked that game. So any opportunity to kind of get back into that world was cool. But That's I mean, that's a whole conversation topic, is like the advent of DLC and new maps and games.
Right, just to fully cover the systems that I have. Long time ago, I bought a Dreamcast when it was already dead. It was well dead when I bought it, but I really enjoy having it. I wish I had more games for it, of course, games being expensive, but I really like the Dreamcast. Sega's last gasp. It was always destined to fail, but they tried anyway. There's some really cool games for it. I do own a couple. Like, I own Jet Grind Radio, which is a really interesting, unique game where you like rollerblade around and do graffiti all over the city. That's really cool.
Yeah.
With like a cool sort of like electronic soundtrack. They actually made a sequel for it on Xbox called like Jet Set Radio or something like that.
Yeah, I played it.
But again, it's sort of a really quirky Japanese style game. Like Crazy Taxi was one of Dreamcast's sort of hidden gems. I don't own it though, but I think they made a Crazy Taxi too. I've got Street Fighter 3 Third Impact, which is just another version of Street Fighter 3, but pretty good. I got the first Power Stone, not the second one. And of course, that's how we first played. The first version of Code Veronica, which is still my favorite Resident Evil, came out that. They made a better version on the PlayStation 2 called Veronica X, but I still really would love to own the original version. Ryan owns it, because he has a Dreamcast too, that he got at some point. I own a 3DS, which I haven't played in forever, but has some good stuff on, including like the first Zelda that I actually just like beat start to finish and felt really good about. A Link Between Worlds.
Nice.
A Link Between Worlds. Finally, like the perfect balance for somebody like me who loses patience kind of easily. Like the dungeons were hard, but just easy enough for me to do them and feel like I accomplished something, I guess. So I consider myself an old school gamer in a lot of ways, but not when it comes to Zelda, because in a lot of Zeldas I just sort of throw up my hands and give up. Of course, I love the Switch one. Of course, I own Switch. That's my newest system. Is I own Nintendo Switch, which I got over 2 years ago because I used Shopper's Optimum points and got over $170 off. So that worked out really well. And the Switch has turned out to be a really great system for me in a lot of ways, especially because of the JRPGs. There's so many I can get, and I love that aspect of it. So I'm always watching the store for those because I had to get a lot of them digitally. And of course, Nintendo, I got such a great deal on the system. The games are still expensive as hell, so it's hard getting the games at the rate I would like to. But yeah, so I am really happy with the Switch. I think it's Nintendo's best system since the 64.
Yeah. Well, I guess I can go over what I've got.
Yeah.
Got my original NES. I'm not sure if it's functional or not. I haven't tried. I do remember taking it apart at one time and putting it back together for some stupid reason.
Yeah, mine is back at my parents'. I didn't take it with me. My Super NES is, okay, I'll just say very quickly what I have hooked up and working in my apartment. In my apartment, I have a Super Nintendo, and the PS2 I think is dead, but it's there. So back in my other room over there is my retro sort of gaming room. I've got an old TV for it. So I've got the PS2, which I think is dead, the Dreamcast, and the Super NES. They're all hooked up there. And then out here in my main room, my main TV, I've got a PS3, a PS4, and a Switch. And handheld, I've got a Game Boy Advance, a Game Boy SP, a 3DS, Nintendo 3DS, and a PSP. So those are the systems I've got at my home.
Sheesh.
That are hooked up and working.
Yeah.
The NES Master System.
Oh, Master System.
TurboGrafx 16.
Never played a TurboGrafx 16. I'm so jealous of you. So
all
jealous.
the Xboxes I've got. I don't have the only PlayStation I have is the 4.
Do you have many games with TurboGrafx?
I'll have to go look, man. I've got a handful.
Yeah, you definitely have to show them. I want to see them.
I have no games for the Dreamcast though. That's the only Sega system I think I have still. I don't know what happened with my Genesis or my Sega CD, but I have a few Sega CD games. I've got the Jurassic Park game that is terrible. I know I've got that. That's the one I came across lately.
There were only a few games on the CD that were any good. Lunar, I would love to play so much.
But then, yeah, I think that's it. Well, I've got a Game Boy Advance, DS, PSP.
You have a Vita, though. I've never. That's weird. The Vita is the only Sony system I've never bought.
This is what I was showing off earlier. It was kind of hard to describe, but it has this area here that you like can move around and move things, and it's really not utilized very well. But gimmicky.
So presently, again, maybe I'm on the wrong show, presently I have a Nintendo 64, perhaps melting in my garage outside. I gotta try and find
Save
that
it, save it.
Yeah, I have. So I mean, not hooked up, but I do have it out there. I have a PlayStation 4 and an Xbox One, and I have a Nintendo Switch. Again, the Switch isn't hooked up, but when we moved, it had been hooked up. But I hooked up PlayStation 4 in my office and Xbox One in the theater. We have a theater. It's Texas. But in terms of just like I had a regular Nintendo, I had a Super Nintendo, I had a Game Gear, like we talked about. I had a Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Xbox One. And I did have a Nintendo DS. I loved the Nintendo DS. I actually used to play that quite a lot, the original DS.
Yeah, I got it.
There's some really fun games on that system, but I forget. I eventually just like traded it in or something. But yeah. I think that brings me. I think that's current now.
I remember when
I'm still not sure what I'm gonna get this winter. I'm still kind of debating. I don't know.
When the DS first came out, it was like they had this whole angle that they were trying to sell it to like older ladies. Like it had all kinds of
Was
like
that the stylus pen?
fitness shit, like fitness. Like I know the lady I used to work with, she had one, and it's like, what did you ever use that for? Like she didn't play games on it. She like tracked her calories or steps or something. I don't know.
What system had the fucking Game Boy camera? Remember that? Like a really low, terrible camera?
I think it was 64 was what worked with that.
One of them, had like a Game Boy camera, and it was really low, terrible stuff.
Didn't have a printer.
You know what
also,
else there was?
You could hook a little printer up to it. Like I don't know, just a dumb gimmick.
I never had either the original Game Boy or was it Game Boy Slim or Game Boy Thin or
Game Boy
I remember
Game Boy Pocket.
Game Boy Pocket.
I never got. I always wanted a Pocket. I never got it. I jumped.
They were cool.
I remember like Game Boy was seemingly dead, and then it sort of like became really popular in like the late 90s again.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, because I remember a bunch of my buddies were playing like Pokemon or some stupid shit. Like I never played that, but I do remember that had a resurgence. But did you ever play? Or it was like an attachment for the Super Nintendo. You could play Game Boy games on the Super Nintendo. I don't remember what the thing was called, but it was like a cartridge you stuck in the Super Nintendo, and then you could stick a Game Boy game in it, and you could play Game Boy games on your big screen. That's how I played like Super Mario Land 2. And I think that was one of very few games I had for it. But I do remember playing the one where you fought Wario. Like Wario's introduction was Super Mario Land 2. Again, I don't think that counts as another system exactly, but I did have that.
Yeah, I had a friend who had the thing where you could hook the Game Boy up to the
Super
Nintendo.
Saw the appeal, honestly. I mean, I guess you did, but the graphics weren't good, right?
Yeah, on a TV, it's not going to look great.
I mean, I don't think it looked any worse than like a Super Super Mario Land 2. I don't think it looked worse than like Super. I think the colors. The issue with it was about like the colors, but I think was it called Game Boy Color?
No, Game Boy Color was its own thing. That was its own system.
Well, this did provide like a color palette. Like it wasn't as vibrant as like Super Mario World or something, but it added color to it, and it didn't exactly upscale it. But anyway, my general point, Jay, is I don't think it made it look horrible. Like it looked fine on like just an old CRT TV. It probably would look like shit now on like a flat screen, but I don't know. On the other TV, it looked fine to me.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, it's that system or that handheld, the Game Boy, had such a long lifespan.
Oh yeah, incredible. Definitely the longest.
I mean, I give Nintendo credit, like the way that they shrank the size of it, and then it's like that social aspect that they capitalized off of. I'm telling you, even when it went even beyond like when my friends were doing it. Like, so I was in like junior high, early high school, when my buddies were playing that, like with like Pokemon, and then they stopped. And then years later, when I was like a camp counselor for like summers after high school or whenever that was. Like I remember kids at camp would bring, and this is already into like the early mid 2000s. Like kids in camp would bring it, so Nintendo eked a lot of life out of that. You know, really kept it pretty vibrant. I thought it was cool.
It's, like I got that Christmas that it was released. My parents got it for me again. Great, good for them because I didn't even know it existed. So I got it then, and what is that? 86, Cole?
The Game Boy?
Yeah,
it might be 88.
I know you know your years. Whatever year that was. So I would have been 8, and that thing, like I remember being an adult, and kids would like have a big fat Game Boy shoved in their like Jinko jeans, and their in their Jinkos. I'm like, man, like, I've been out for a long time, but that thing's still around,
North American release in 89.
Oh, dang.
So around the same time as the Super Nintendo.
That was a good Christmas, man.
I probably got it. I'm not sure. I must have gotten it before Super Nintendo. I probably had it a year or two before I got because I didn't get my Super Nintendo till late. It was spring of '94 when I got it. So I probably had that first. Yeah, the Game Boy was really something.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, we can probably wrap here because all this was, like we said, was an introduction. All sorts of things that we've touched on that we're going to do in greater detail in later episodes. We can talk about Sega. We can talk about Nintendo. We can talk about a generation. We can, talk about all sorts of different things. It's this one, we just sort of, we're scratching the surface of the things that we can talk about. And hopefully you've given viewers, anybody that watches this now or later, an idea of sort of each of our sort of gaming identities, the stuff that we have a history with and the stuff that we like best. You guys want to fire off some of your absolute favorite games, just very top. Like, give me 3 or 4 of your absolute favorites.
I need some time to make a list, but
yeah.
I mean,
so
Halo, Gears of War, off the top of my head.
I want to I don't know. I don't want to give cliche answers, but Super Mario Brothers 3.
Speak from the heart.
That's just an awesome game. Every time I keep getting it. Like when it was on the Wii store, I got it. It's on the Switch store. I played it. Like it's just so much fun. It was on DS. I was playing it on DS. So Super Mario Brothers 3. The Mega Man X series. Just generally. And like he says, Halo. I do like Gears of War. I don't know if it's in my favorites, but I do like it. The Batman Arkham series. Oh God, Resident Evil. Again, I know we'll hopefully we could talk about that in some detail.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I'll pick Perfect Dark over GoldenEye, just because again, I think it improved on GoldenEye. I think, but. Your question is a surprise, Cole. That's a heck of a question.
Again, I didn't want it to get. It's just to give people an idea. Like that. We'll have time to get more in depth in some of our reasons for this, but I just thought since this is an introduction, give some people an idea of what we're about. My favorite game is Final Fantasy VI. The American version originally was Final Fantasy III. Final Fantasy VII is a close second. I love in the modern era. I love the Kingdom Hearts series. I'm a sucker for those. They might not be particularly deep games, but they mean a lot to me on a personal level. I grew up playing Castlevania and Mega Man. Those are important series. For fighting, it would have to be the Street Fighter series, although I'm not that hardcore anymore. And then you've got a spin-off like a Final Fantasy Tactics is right up there. My favorite Castlevania is still Symphony of the Night, which is probably most people's. Resident Evil is important to me as well. As pointed out, probably Code Veronica is my favorite there. Earthbound is an amazing game from the Super Nintendo that nobody talks about. That is just one of my favorite things ever. Like it's actually in my top 5, even though a lot of people haven't played it. Again, because it's just so quirky and Japanese and fun. I actually own it on the Super Nintendo. I wish I'd bought it in the big box that it came in back in the day. But I'll talk, of course, about all the dumb mistakes I made when I was younger, because I was like, oh no, I don't need Chrono Trigger, which is again is one of my favorite games, definitely Chrono Trigger, which I have the DS version of. Be like, no, I want Batman Forever, like stupid shit like that, wasting time. Like I wasted so much time. I wasted so much time and money on like dumb beat 'em ups that aren't any good. There were good beat 'em ups like Turtles in Time. Ryan owns that. We played the hell out of that over and over again. Just one of the great all times. And even the earlier ones, I owned and I'm dying to play again are 2 and 3. I owned both of those in Nintendo, and I love those. I'm just like you. Mario 3 is my favorite. Mario 64 is right behind it. I love Mario 64.
Oh yeah,
Really?
So I'm definitely leaving some stuff out. I love the Star Fox games too, but I'm definitely leaving some stuff out. But yeah, give people just sort of, I
Fire
feel,
off more.
for more obscure stuff, I've been into some like weird dungeon crawler stuff like Vagrant Story. It's more of a deep cut. Suikoden is a cool Konami RPG. What else is there? I know I'm missing stuff, but of course, Lunar. I love the new Lunar games. I don't know why Eternal Blue, which was the sequel to Silver Star Story, never got some sort of re-release because Silver Star Story did. Like, where's Lunar Eternal Blue? I haven't played it in 25 fucking years, practically. I'm not 25, but a long time, and that bothers me. So yeah, I love Lunar, which kind of started a lot of that JRPG stuff.
Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
It's a big one for a lot of people. Yeah.
Go with Super Mario Galaxy, Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto 5.
I still have only played a bit of 5. I'm gonna get into it.
It's
Red Dead Redemption, again, I don't know that I've ever played a game,
but
like that game emotionally impacted me.
Mhm.
The end of the game makes me sad. Like, I never had a video game like make me feel like that before. So that's a great game. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Cole.
No, same thing. I see that was part of during my era where I wasn't getting new stuff. So I played that like years later after the fact. I picked it up super cheap because it was already everybody in the world had played it except me by the time it was. Of course, the second one's out, and I hope to play that at some point. But there's other. I'm trying to concentrate on the Switch for the next little while. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, so hopefully that gives people a good impression of, again, our preferences and some of our experiences. It's going to be a lot of reminiscing on the show. Obviously, we're going to talk about games we played way back in the day and some of the ones that we still play today. And like I said, we'll try to focus on all sorts of things that we're going to focus on going forward with the show. This one was a little bit of everything, just touching on it. But it's the first episode. We don't want it to go overly long, so I think we can wrap. But we're excited to embark on this. This year has been a hell of a year. I don't have to say why. For a lot of reasons, it's been a hell of a year. Not a lot of positives. So we're hoping this is a positive. This is a good thing. This show, it's good for us. It's good for people watching it. We're excited about doing it. So that's it for the final dungeon, this time episode 0. So look forward to episode 1 coming to you soon. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Cole. That's Jay. That's Eric. All right. Peace out. Game over.